Ladies and gents, boys and girls, Monday, July the 24th, 2023, and we are live here on the Daily Crow as we kick off yet another week, the final week, by the way, in the month of July. And as you and I both know what that means, August is upon us. There is college football in August. Cannot wait. I see Travi, Brendan M., Xavier, what's going on? Also, those in the Big Cock Club Discord, head over to the TDC Questions channel, the TDC Questions channel, to be sure your questions are answered there. Guys, I got a packed show for you, a lot to get into here on this Monday, and I got a really exciting announcement in regards to content as well that I'll get into in just a second. But again, tons to discuss here on this Monday. I see Jeff Gullidge as well. Jeff, appreciate you. What's up, man? Thank you so much. Again, if you're in the Big Cock Club Discord, head over to the TDC Questions channel, the TDC Questions channel, to be sure your questions are answered there. Our guy Dave Garrick says thoughts and prayers are with you to Chase in regards to, I think, him modding the chat today, some other things going on as well. Either way, again, appreciate each and every single one of y'all tuning in, guys. Really excited. Hope you all, by the way, had a fantastic weekend, as the weekends without college football, thankfully, are coming to an end very, very soon. We had a good one, though. Did some work around the house. Yesterday, went to Lake Jocassee and did some kayaking. That was a lot of fun. Had a really, really good time. So, again, making the most of the weekends without college football, because, again, very soon we will be glued to our TVs talking about this thing, breaking down this thing, dissecting it each and every single way, and really, really excited for that. What I also just realized as well, as we did not post the Daily Crow links, if you will, to social media. I will get that out after our first segment. Not going to try to do that while we're on the air. It's weird. Some days I forget to do it. Some days I do it ahead in advance. We've had a very, very busy morning, by the way. And again, a busy show today as well. Hour number 3. We'll take all of your questions, your comments, your calls, and our Q&A Power Hour. Really excited for that. Again, to hear from you guys. The phone lines will be open at 843-790-3377. And hour number 2, we have my good friend Chris Marler of College Football Uncensored and the Saturday Down South entity. He will be joining us. And what's so funny about that, ironically enough, I'm sitting there scrolling on Twitter, and I see Marler has posted something, some sort of joke, whatever. So I'm like, oh, funny, that's cool. I clicked to go to his profile. Account suspended. And if you have not been following along very closely, Chris Marler got his account suspended weeks ago, or I think on April Fool's, actually, for making like a Kirby Smart sex tape joke or something like that. So we'll let him kind of tell what in the world's going on with his Twitter account. Nobody hates Chris Marler, I think, more than Elon Musk, who has now rebranded Twitter to X.com, in case you have missed that. So what do you think about the rebrand, by the way? I said it's a worse rebrand than the time South Carolina went from USC to U of SC. And I think everyone's still going to call it Twitter. And what's tweeting going to be called now? If it's X, what's tweeting going to be called? I mean, Zweeting? I don't know. Either way, Chris Marler going to join us in the second hour. We're going to talk all things SEC football, SEC media days, and, of course, the South Carolina Gamecocks as well. And then I got things in this first hour, of course, we're going to get into. Really, really excited. Also, our 2023 opponent preview series continues on the show today as we talk Florida Gators. My good friend Neil Schulman of InAllKindsOfWeather.com. I'm sure you all are familiar with his work by now, but he joined me for about a 30-minute conversation to break down all things Florida going in the 2023 football season, as well as the game against South Carolina in week 7. So really, really excited for that, guys. Also, I mentioned I had a big announcement on the front end of the show, so let's go ahead and get into it. In regards to content, and I know this doesn't apply, or, it does affect you all, but not to the level in which you knew there was a schedule set, and you're like, okay, I'm waiting on this to happen on this date, and now it gets bumped up, move, whatever. But just to let you all know, the position unit preview series, I think that is one of our bigger pieces of off-season content, right? Because we really get into the nitty-gritty with every single position unit, talking, who these guys are, who's set for a breakout season, most approved, best overall, season will be successful if we give the grades for each position unit. And so that's something that's really fun. Obviously, it's a highly debatable topic, and it gets us all very well aware with just what this roster is, who's on this roster, and the guys that are set to be impact guys, those who need to step up, etc. Well, obviously, with the way we distribute content now, things have changed up a little bit in regard to the schedule. You guys may have noticed we're doing the season simulation series earlier, which, by the way, I feel like I need to take a moment to apologize for the season simulation series last night because 16-0 against North Carolina. Guys, I don't know what happened. I feel like a coach in a post-game press conference right now. I don't know what happened. I don't know what happened. I flat out. So what we're going to do is this. We're going to take the playbook. We're going to take the game plan. We're going to take everything we were doing. We're going to throw it in the garbage. Okay? We're going to throw it in the garbage. We're going to start new and fresh tonight with our season simulation series week 2 against Furman, a.k.a. FCS East, because Furman's not in the game. Either way, though, we're going a brand new playbook. We're going air raid. We're going to throw the football. I don't give a damn what it is. We're going to change up the sliders. We're going to change up everything. So I apologize for the product that was displayed last night in a 16-0 loss to North Carolina in the simulation. Either way, back to more important topics. Like I mentioned, the position unit preview series is something that we do every single preseason. Getting to the point, we are moving that up. We're bumping that up. The position unit preview series will begin tomorrow. We're going to start talking quarterbacks on tomorrow's show, and these position unit previews, the content, if you will, around them will take up 2 days on TDC, along with everything else that we are doing as well. So it will begin tomorrow. I was planning a couple of weeks from now. Originally, we were not going to start that until August, which granted, that's right around the corner. But tomorrow, we will begin the position unit preview series as we begin talking about Gamecocks quarterbacks. Tomorrow, Thursday, we'll jump into running backs. Tuesday of next week, we'll jump into wide receivers. Then we'll go tight ends next Thursday, et cetera, on down the line as we get you ready for the 2023 football season. Going to be a lot of fun. Looking forward to that. Again, those are always a blast as we drop most approved, best overall. Season will be successful if, overall grade, top storylines, other things as well. Really, really excited for that content. And again, guys, excited for today's show as we keep the conversation rolling, coming off of SEC Media Days, getting to hear from all 14 SEC head coaches was a really rewarding experience. Number one, I got to ask questions to 6 of those coaches in Nashville, Tennessee. And as you all know, guys, again, we are getting to the month of August, which means we're going to be hardcore in the nitty-gritty, talking college football, breaking these games down, breaking down position units, every little thing you can think of. As for right now, though, we are still somewhat in the midst of list season. And so I'm going to give you all one of my final lists. I promise there won't be many more of these, although I could argue that it's some of your favorite content because of the debate aspect and, everything we can talk about. And again, it's always debatable when you're talking all 14 SEC teams, soon to be all 16 SEC teams, and there's always a conversation and banter to be had. So with that being said, coming out of SEC Media Days, I'm ranking the head coaches of the Southeastern Conference heading into the 2023 football season. And this is how I see them stacking up going into this season. Now, there could be a lot, and there will be a lot of shuffling based off what guys do in pivotal years. We'll get to that more in just a second. Let's get into these rankings, starting at the bottom, and we'll go all the way up to number 1. At number 14, I have Mississippi State's Zach Arnett. And guys, I think this one is pretty self-explanatory. When you are a brand new head coach in the SEC, you think about it 2 years ago, Shane Beamer was at the bottom of this list, fairly or unfairly. When you are a brand new head coach, and oh, by the way, you've never been a head coach before. That's the big kicker, right? You've never been a head coach before. And Zach Arnett, say all the great things about him, right? I was able to ask him a question. Great coach, great dude. But there's just a lot of unknowns. Everything right now for Zach Arnett is an unknown. He has come in and radically changed things up, obviously thrust into a situation that none of us expected with the passing of the late, great Mike Leach, the Pirate, as he was known as. Zach Arnett is changing up the offense completely, going from Leach's traditional air raid to a more pro-style type of system under Kevin Barbay. Is that going to work? Again, I think the answer to that question is going to very much so dictate where Zach Arnett is ranked on this list next season. My big question for Arnett is this. Is he the long-term answer in Starkville? Because on one hand, I think it's a situation where Mississippi State is a lot like South Carolina. And getting a guy in there who believes in it, who believes in Starkville, who believes in MSU and believes what they can be, not what they've always been, I think that's really important. So Zach Arnett, he is a Mississippi State guy. But it doesn't mean he's going to be a successful head coach for the long haul. And so I just wonder, though, does he have a similar year one to like what a Shane Beamer had in Columbia, where his teams are maybe playing above their talent level, playing with a new sense of belief and this chip on their shoulder? And certainly we're all expecting the Bulldogs to do that as they honor the late, great Mike Leach. But for right now, guys, understandably so, you have to list Zach Arnett at number 14 because he's nothing but a big question mark right now as he goes into his first head season as not just Mississippi State's head coach, but his first season being a head coach in college football. Next on the list at number 13, the Florida Gators' Billy Napier. And Billy Napier's a guy I think over the next year or two or 3 years could rocket up this list because the potential is there. You look at the way Billy Napier is recruiting right now at an elite level. I think if Florida is patient, there are a lot of reasons to believe why Billy Napier can succeed. He can win at a high level. Will he get the time necessary? That's yet to be determined. And you also look at last year, and of course, guys, again, on today's show, we did the opponent preview series talking to Neil Schulman of ItAllKindsOfWeather.com, and he made a great point, by the way, about Florida last year. 6-7 in year one, 3-5 in SEC play. You lose your final 3 games. You lose to Vanderbilt in year one. But if you look back at year one of his tenure, the majority of guys that popped, the majority of guys that made major impacts and return in year two of Billy Napier are his guys. They are guys that followed Billy Napier from where he was at Louisiana, from the Sun Belt, or different guys he pulled in the portal or true freshmen or what have you, and they popped. If Billy Napier is able to show in this year, in year two, if he's number one, if he can overachieve, he's got to. Over-under's 5.5. If he can overachieve those numbers, some more of his guys take center stage and Graham Mertz maybe plays a little bit better than we're expecting, I think Billy Napier, certainly, he's got the potential to rocket up this list as well. But right now, what you get on a Napier, it's just a lot of unknowns, guys. It's a lot of unknowns. Year two's a pivotal year. Year three will also be a pivotal year. But right now, just because you're a successful Sun Belt coach doesn't mean you deserve to be, obviously, in the top half in regards to SEC coaches. And at a school like Florida, there's no excuse. You should win. You have the resources. You have the facilities. You have the fan support. Right now, it looks like you've got the NIL as well. There's no excuse. Massive year upcoming for Billy Napier. Right now, he is ranked 13th on my list. Coming in at number 12, Missouri's Eli Drinkwitz, the Jeff Fisher of college football, because all this guy does is go 500. That's all he does. They just signed him to a contract extension, which I think was a questionable move, to say the least. If there's any coach in the SEC, guys, because I'll tell you this, Billy Napier's not getting fired. There are 31 million reasons why Billy Napier will not be fired at season's end. Eli Drinkwitz is the one that I think you could see potentially, even after the extension, which, whatever, guys. I mean, money's not real in the SEC. We all know that. If a school wants a coach gone, they'll make it happen. Eli Drinkwitz is one of those. And I promise I'm not coming off as a salty Gamecock fan, because some Mizzou folks are going to look at that and say, oh, he's salty because, Missouri's own South Carolina. That's not really it. But he is the Jeff Fisher of college football. Death, taxes, and Eli Drinkwitz going 500. I mean, you can bank on it. And we've heard a lot of talk, not so much hype necessarily because they were picked by the media to finish 6th in the SEC East. But we've heard the chatter about returning production on the defensive side. And if they can figure it out offensively, they could win 8, 9, 10 games, right? Cousin Shane from that SEC podcast has 10 games. But they're being looked at as a potential breakout team in the SEC. Could be an 8-win team in the SEC this year. Could finish 3rd, maybe 2nd in the East. If they fail to make a bowl game, I think Eli Drinkwitz is a guy that could really be facing some serious pressure and maybe lose his job. I don't think it's likely. But it could happen. And so with that being said, until Missouri has that breakout season and Eli Drinkwitz shows that he's not just what he's always been there, I think ranking him 12th in the SEC, I think it's fair. I think it's very fair. Certainly you could interchange with some others that we're going to talk about here shortly, but until Eli Drinkwitz shows anything differently than what he's already been, I think 12th in the SEC is more than fair. He's got to prove that he's not the Jeff Fisher of college football, which he has shown to this point that he is. Number 11 on my list. And it's funny, the guys in the Discord were talking about that C Philly is our local Clark Lee stand. Maybe it's true, maybe it's not. I've got Clark Lee much higher on my list than many others. I've got Clark Lee of Vanderbilt at number 11. Number 1, love what Clark Lee is all about. Again, was able to ask him a question at SEC Media Days. But you hear this guy talk about Vanderbilt football. And I really respect it. I respect the hell out of it. Because he's saying things like, we want to have the best program in college football. 5-7's not good enough. That's not our standard. He does not talk like a coach that is the head coach of the Vanderbilt Commodores. We'll just say that. Year 1 of his tenure was rough, to say the least. Last year, guys, you beat Kentucky and you beat Florida. And I don't think, and if you're, let me put it this way, if you're a coach that you can bring Vanderbilt into a season, and I know they were picked to finish 7th by the media, they're going to be picked to finish 7th. I mean, that's a given. But you're at least making people think about it. That's saying something, in my opinion. That's saying something. He's a Vanderbilt guy, and I think to get Vandy out of the cellar, it's going to take a guy like a Clark Lee. It's going to take a Clark Lee who has been there. He's cut his teeth at that program. Again, similar to Shane Beamer. Cut his teeth at that program. He believes in what it can be. They're finally starting to invest in facilities and different things. Clark Lee talked about at SEC Media Days, the pains of progress. The pains of progress. Even talked about a story talking about, that he heard the jackhammer going on outside of his office. And, that reminded him of the pains of progress. I'm not saying that Vanderbilt's going to be a consistent year in, year out, bowl game type of team. I'm not saying that. What I am saying, I think Clark Lee could be a coach that gets Vanderbilt football to a point where we no longer look at Vandy as an automatic win, as is evidenced to last year when they beat Florida and Kentucky. 2 teams, by the way, who were much more talented than them. So Clark Lee is obviously getting the most out of his guys. We'll see how the Commodores how they fare this year. My apologies. How the Commodores fare this year. But I like what Clark Lee's doing in Nashville. And I think when you look at Clark Lee versus Eli Drinkwitz, Billy Napier, whatever, Clark Lee's doing more with less, guys. And that moves you up my list. As we move to number 10 on my list, we go to Fayetteville. Sam Pittman of the Arkansas Razorbacks last season really knocked Sam Pittman down this list, going 6-6. I know that KJ Jefferson was dealing with injury, didn't have him the whole season. And they really felt the repercussions of that. I'm really curious to see what Arkansas looks like going from Kendall Briles to this Dan Enos offense. Because we've heard mixed reviews, guys. Honestly, you talk to folks and they say, KJ Jefferson, best quarterback in the SEC. We ranked him #1, best quarterback in the SEC. He's going to thrive. He's going to flourish. You talk to some other people and they say, how is KJ Jefferson going to handle this new offense where maybe a little bit more is put on his shoulders, a little bit more is expected of him? It's not as simple as the spread and being at the mesh point and reading that. Now he's got reads. Now he's got checks. He's got things he's got to do at the line of scrimmage. Maybe they weren't asking him to do last year or any of the previous couple of years. How that OC hire works, and we've heard this before, how that OC hire works is going to go a long, long way, and not just determining where Sam Pittman ranks on this list, but his future in Fayetteville, to be transparent. Sam Pittman is a culture guy. He's an Arkansas guy. Guys, he's got a hog statue in his backyard. And besides Shane Beamer, I think he's probably the most liked head coach in the SEC. Everybody wants to see Sam Pittman succeed. And I think he's done a great job. I mean, you look at what he's done with that Arkansas program, the way it was left in ruins by Chad Morris, which is just a dirty word, guys, if not a dirtier word in Fayetteville than Will Muschamp is in Columbia. What he's done in his short time there, you got to tip your cap, truly. Winning 3 games in 2020, that felt like a huge victory in 2021. And maybe Pittman's a victim of his own expectations because in 2021, you win 9 games, you pop off. I mean, year 3, you're expected to keep it going. College football fans don't like going backwards, but that's what they did last year, going 6-6. So this is a big year for Sam Pittman. Right now, I got him 10th on my list, but again, one of the most likable guys in college football in the SEC, most certainly. Got to show you something this year, though, with that hiring of Dan Enos and a new DC as well. Getting the coordinator hires right is pivotal for Sam Pittman. At number 9 on our list, the Auburn Tigers' own, and he's back in the SEC, Hugh Freeze. And one of the reasons, guys, that Hugh Freeze is so high up this list, and one of the reasons why you're going to see Hugh Freeze ranked highly in these preseason head coach rankings lists is because of this. There are very few men out there, very few coaches who have beaten Nick Saban. There are even less that have beaten Nick Saban multiple times. Hugh Freeze is one of them. There's a reason that everyone of the last couple of years was asking, when's Hugh Freeze coming back to the SEC? When's Hugh Freeze coming back to SEC football? One of the most highly sought after coaches. Really, the question was just, when's the SEC going to allow him back in, right? When's the SEC going to remove their block on him and allow him to take an SEC job? And the time is now with the Auburn Tigers. I think that Auburn is one of those programs, one of those teams that we might look up in 3 or 4 years and all of a sudden you're going to see that Auburn logo right there at the top of the SEC West. I think it's only a matter of time. Hugh Freeze has won everywhere he has been. He was very successful at Ole Miss. And listen, I understand. He made mistakes. He paid for those. He paid for those dearly when he lost his job and had to leave the conference. From everything we've heard, it sounds like he's learned from those mistakes and he's ready to move on, move forward, and be the best version of himself, not just as a person, but a head football coach also. I think Auburn got a damn good one. And again, he ranks at number 9 on my list. Moving to number 8. And I've been catching a lot of hell this morning for this one. The Gamecocks' very own Shane Beamer at the number 8 spot. Let me explain this one, guys. Again, this is one of those coaches where this season could send his ranking a number of different ways. If South Carolina matches last year's win total or God forbid, exceeds it, Shane Beamer's got to be talked about as a top 5 head coach in the SEC. He has to be. He absolutely has to be. Right now, I've got him at number 8. Now, let's try to understand these rankings. There are a lot of good head coaches, guys. I'm not sitting here saying that any of these head coaches are not good at all. They stink. They should be fired today. But it's very competitive, as is the SEC. So Shane Beamer in his first 2 seasons, you overachieve in year 1. Win the Duke's Mayo Bowl, win 7 games. You overachieve in year 2. Back-to-back wins over top 10 teams. lose your bowl game to Notre Dame. Either way, though, you overachieve. Coming into year 3, whether it pops or not is really going to determine whether he moves up this list. There are guys ahead of him, guys, that are just more established. They've been coaching longer. They've been doing it longer. There's a couple that have won national championships. Those things matter. It's great. Hey, you had 2 great first years. Awesome. You were also terrible for 90% of last year. So, we need to see in year 3, is it going to be more of what we saw in the first 9 or 10 games? Or is it going to be more of what we saw in the final 3? Getting the Dowell-Loggins hire right. Shane Beamer's, I think, future in Columbia. I think Shane Beamer's reputation as a head coach, I think it rests on that. I love what SEC Mike says on that SEC podcast when he says, you can really start to judge coaches and learn about coaches when they have to make coordinator hires. What type of hire do they make? How does it work out? When they've got to fire and hire coordinators. Because you swung and missed on your first OC. We all agree on that. You swung and missed. This second one can't be a swing and miss. Dowell-Loggins has to be the guy. He's got to be the right hire. And I'm not saying, guys, you got to win 8 games for Shane Beamer to stay at where he's at or move up the list. You could have a better football team and win 7 games this year. Heck, you could have a better football team, arguably win 6 football games. Shane Beamer is middle of the pack for a couple of reasons. Again, he has done more with less. He has overachieved. Got to see that consistency from this South Carolina team. And there are just folks ahead of him that are longer tenured. They've got more of a resume. And one of them is at number 7. As we continue in our list, number 7, Ole Miss's Lane Kiffin. And listen, while Kiffin's SEC Media Days appearance was forgettable, to say the least, Lane Kiffin's a guy, he's done this for a while, man. He's got a reputation. You know what you're getting in Lane. You're getting high-flying offense. What he's done with the Ole Miss program, taking them to a 10-win season, something that had never been done in Oxford before. And while his antics may be, questionable at times, Lane Kiffin's got his own style. He's got his own way of doing things. He's still one of the best coaches. When it comes to making an offensive game plan, if I got one coach or a couple of coaches, whatever, like he's at the top of the list when you're talking about, okay, I need an offensive game plan to go out and win a football game. Lane Kiffin's right there. You think about his previous experiences, he got the seal of approval from a guy like Nick Saban. That also helps a lot too. When you look at the resume, his tenure, I got Lane Kiffin at number 7 on my list. Moving to number 6, and of course, we're in the top half now with the SEC head coaches. Number 6, Kentucky's Mark Stoops. And this is one, again, Gamecock fans are just going crazy right now. Guys, he is going into his 11th season in Lexington. We're talking about overachieving and what Beamer has done. Mark Stoops has been doing what Beamer's doing for 10 years. He's been doing it for a decade. That puts you ahead of a Shane Beamer who's only going into his 3rd season. Bottom line. Mark Stoops has done with Kentucky what many of us thought was impossible. He's made them a real threat in the SEC East. I, guys, was honestly surprised that South Carolina was picked ahead of Kentucky in the SEC's media predictions because, dude, Kentucky, what they've done building up the cachet, and South Carolina typically doesn't get that level of respect. Yes, they had a down year last year. I understand. But we're talking about a Kentucky program. They're making bowl games on a consistent basis. Not just that. They're winning 7, 8, 9 games at times. They've won 10 games the last couple of years. They're winning bowl games left and right. I mean, Mark Stoops has completely changed Kentucky football. Now, as some have pointed out, in big games against ranked opponents, he has struggled. But to not have Mark Stoops in your top half of SEC coaches, I think is a mistake. At number 5, and I tell you guys, of all of the coaches that I listed, this is the one I felt the most icky about. Jimbo Fisher of Texas A&M. All the scrutiny, all the criticism is fair. It is. It's fair. Because you look at what Texas A&M did last year, going 5-7. With all the talent they have, absurd. It's absurd that Texas A&M went 5-7. It is. This is a huge year for Jimbo Fisher and the Aggies. You hire Bobby Petrino to be your OC. Can Jimbo get his ego out of the way and let Bobby call plays? If he can, and A&M wins a couple games, they obviously show improvement from last year. They get to that 8-9 win mark, maybe 10, whatever, have a breakout season, then this ranking is justified. They win 5 or 6 games again, I wouldn't put Jimbo Fisher in the top 10. I wouldn't let Jimbo Fisher touch my football team because it's malpractice at that point. With all the talent you have all over the field, the way they've recruited, if they don't win at minimum, I'd say 8 games, it's malpractice. It's truly malpractice at that point. This is the ranking. This is the spot I felt the most icky about because Jimbo Fisher, he's got a national title, though. That matters, guys. I don't care how long ago it was. You're a national championship head coach. There's not many of those out there actively in college football. So his reputation more than anything puts Jimbo Fisher in this spot. Admittedly, though, it's the one I felt the most icky about. And if they don't break out this season, Jimbo Fisher won't even be in my top 10 this time next year. At number 4, I've got Tennessee's Josh Heupel. Many of you will be upset about that. I really don't give a damn. Josh Heupel has shown at every stop elite offense. I mean, it's just the trademark of Josh Heupel. They're going to be elite on offense. If Tennessee can improve defensively, I think right now, unless Joe Milton is a bust, they're probably the 4th best team in the SEC. They are my pick. They were my pick for number 2 in the SEC East. They are my pick for number 2 in the SEC East. And I think that Josh Heupel, when you look at what he's done with Tennessee in his first 2 years, guys, this is a program that was dead for over a decade. It is no small thing, no small feat, what he has done with that Tennessee football program early on in his tenure. For that reason, I got him 4th on the list. At number 3, LSU's Brian Kelly. You come in this league and you win the SEC West and take down Nick Saban in year number 1? Guys, that's impressive. I mean, that's damn impressive. He's an assassin. He's a killer, as my guy Blake Ruffino of AYS Sports likes to say. The way they're recruiting, the way they're building, LSU, I mean, just flip a switch, man. Flip a switch. They've got all the resources. They've got the facilities. They got everything you need down there to win at a high level. Brian Kelly, I thought he was a great hire. I know everybody was talking about culture fit and does he really fit with LSU? You know, is he going to fit in there after Edo? I think those questions have been answered. Brian Kelly, number 3 on my list. At number 2, down to Tuscaloosa we go, Nick Saban. Right now, Nick Saban is the 2nd best coach in the SEC. This is the GOAT. This is the greatest of all time. But right now in the SEC, right now, he's 2nd. Alabama showed signs of, I don't know. They showed signs of mortality last year, the way they were playing. Because it's not just about the fact they went 10-2, guys. It's the fact they looked sloppy. I mean, Alabama looked sloppy last year in the regular season. It was not what we were used to when it comes to the Crimson Tide. Tons of penalties, mental mistakes. And now, Nick Saban is depending on Tommy Rees from Notre Dame. You lose Bryce Young on the offensive side at quarterback. You lose Will Anderson on the defensive side. Big season upcoming for Nick Saban. And number 1, guys, Georgia's Kirby Smart. Georgia's Kirby Smart. You're the back-to-back national champions, man. What do I really need to explain this one? They have turned into what Alabama was. Bottom line. They've turned into what Alabama was. Simply put. They built a monster in Athens. And just the simple fact that we're talking about Georgia winning 3 straight national championships and them being the favorite, guys, that hasn't been done in over 90 years. The fact we're even talking about it, it shows you the job that Kirby Smart has done in his tenure in Athens, and he well deserves to be ranked as the number 1 head coach in the SEC entering the 2023 football season. Guys, that being said, let's go ahead and jump into a quick break. On the other side, we will keep the conversation rolling here on this Monday. You're tuned in to the Daily Crow.
Muscle doggy ho. Muscle doggy ho.
All right, guys, we're back here on this Monday, July the 24th, 2023. Appreciate each and every single one of you tuning in. As I mentioned before, The 2023 opponent preview series continues. I have my good friend Neil Schulman of inallkindsofweather.com. Really great stuff, guys. Again, thank you all so much for tuning in. I see the Discord is very active today. My guy, Brendan, he just can't stand the fact that Josh Heupel's a top 5 head coach in the SEC. I don't know what to tell you, Brendan. I don't know what to tell you. Hey, listen, the beauty's in the banter, though. I'll say that. Keep it coming, man. Keep it coming. The beauty is in the banter, indeed. Guys, like I mentioned, going to be a busy week. The position unit preview series gets going tomorrow. We've got today, my good buddy Chris Marler of College Ball Uncensored and Saturday Down South joining the show in the second hour. And then, of course, in our third hour, we've got our Q&A Power Hour. We'll take all of your questions, your comments, your calls. In the meantime, like I mentioned, the 2023 opponent preview series rolls on as we talk the Gamecocks Week 7 opponents, the Florida Gators. Enjoy this conversation with Neil Schulman of inallkindsofweather.com. As our 2023 opponent preview series continues, we go to Gainesville to talk the Florida Gators heading into year 2 of Billy Napier, and who better to help us break down all things Florida football than Neil Schulman of inallkindsofweather.com. He joins the show once again. Neil, appreciate you taking the time, my friend. How's everything going?
Going pretty well on my end. Appreciate that intro. Who better to talk Florida Gators than me? That's pretty high praise. Appreciate that. Things going well. And as a Gator, one of the few in the state of South Carolina myself, it's a little nice that one of the few teams we did beat last year was that team in this state. So that's kind of cool. But looking forward to the season and looking forward to talking about it with you tonight too.
And we'll definitely, Neil, get into all that later in the show. But first things first, let's look back at the 2022 season. It was year 1 of the Billy Napier era, 6-7 overall, 3-5 in the SEC. You lost the Las Vegas Bowl to Oregon State, and a year that a lot of ups and downs, right? What you would expect of year 1. Lost 5 of your last 7, 3 straight to end the season. But you think about the fact you beat South Carolina the way you did. The very next week, you lose to the Vanderbilt Commodores, and that started the losing streak. Just talk about, Neil, year 1 of the Billy Napier era. I'm sure you set out pretty realistic expectations because anytime you have a coaching change, there was a reason for a coaching change, right? It doesn't happen normally for good reasons in the SEC. So talk about year 1 of the Billy Napier era. Do you feel like that it met expectations and your overall takeaways from it?
Well, I think you were talking about meeting expectations. I would say through 10 games it did. At 6-4, and you're telling me, well, now you just have to go 1-1 in the last 2 to meet the Vegas odds of 7-5 in year 1. You know, given that we threw a lot of guys off the team, Brenton Cox, DeJuan Black, Kamar Wilcox, a lot of dismissals, a lot of in-year turnover within the team. You still keep things rolling to that extent that you're able to be basically on track for what you think. I would say that year 1 was going to be a year that we could say met the expectation until Vandy. No one expected that. And then finishing it off with the last 2 losses. I mean, FSU is a respectable team, at least. I don't really know that people put too much stock into that Vegas Bowl. That was kind of a skeleton of a Florida team. The Vanderbilt and the FSU losses were much more frustrating for Florida fans. But, I mean, you kind of hit the nail on the head there. We're talking about the way to synopsize it. Florida was, I think, more talented, at least from a paper standpoint, than fans like to think. That Florida team was certainly capable of beating and, if not hanging around with any team in the country. And even Georgia, the national champ, there we were in a 1-score game with 2 minutes left in the third quarter, couldn't string it together consistently enough. There were too many plays where too many guys didn't do their assignments. There were too many games where most of the Florida guys did their assignments, but there was a stretch or 2 where a couple of guys would let up a little bit. I mean, it could be anything from just loosening the grip on the ball security, missing assignments from the offensive line, missing assignments in defense, just too many guys doing too many of the fundamental things wrong. You add that all up, and it's a team that, I mean, you use the South Carolina and then Vandy example in back-to-back weeks. To me, that's not even the biggest example of the inconsistency. To me, look at the first month. I mean, you beat Utah, top 10 team. They win the Pac-12. I know that's not the SEC, but that's a respectable team that probably goes 8-4, 9-3 in the SEC. So respectable opponent. And then the very next week you lose to Kentucky when Will Levis doesn't play well. And Richardson throws them 2 touchdowns. There's a pick 6. There's another interception that's returned to about the 5-yard line. The defense actually plays well that game. The next week, South Florida, who finishes 1-11, comes into the Swamp, and we need them to mess up a routine hold on a field goal attempt to survive them. The week after that, there we are in Rocky Top. I know we're used to beating Tennessee, but this was a Tennessee team that finished 11-12 and was probably going to the playoff before you guys got done with them, that we were 39 yards away from beating when there was no real reason to expect that heading into the game. And then watching Tennessee go up to a 3-score lead halfway through the fourth quarter. So just the ups and downs, it results in a team that's exactly average. You got a 6-6 team. I mean, the Vegas Bowl counted, but again, that was not really the same team we saw throughout the course of the year. But 6-6, 6-7, whatever. It's a team that wins as many games as it loses, give or take. And that's, I mean, as we know, even you as a South Carolina fan have to know that's not going to get it done for any school in the SEC aside from maybe Vanderbilt. So that's something that I think Florida is going to have to work on beyond just the wins and losses, is the consistency. And I think Napier is doing that, as I'm sure we'll talk about coming up shortly.
Neil, Billy Napier might be the most fascinating head coach heading into the 2023 season, because you think about the pressure that he's facing. And you mentioned year one. Again, the expectations weren't sky high, but for Florida football to come into a season and have an over-under win total of 5.5. SEC football fans, as you and I both know, are like bad doctors. They don't have patience, right? The way that Florida is recruiting would indicate that the Gators are a football program on the rise. The big question we've all heard all offseason, will Florida fans give him the time he needs to enjoy the fruits of the labor that he's putting in right now? I know you've talked about this as well. Just talk about, though, the Florida fan base. What's the mood and the vibe around Billy Napier going into this football season?
Well, I think the vibe among, I mean, if you're going to use the 10-80-10 rule that you use, I guess, in marketing or most businesses, where you assume that there's 10 fringe outliers that are overly positive, 10 fringe outliers are overly negative, 80% in the middle. That's where you go with that's where you target. I think that 80%, as loud as that pessimistic 10% may sound, the middle 80%, I think is prepared for patience, because I think that they know that he was hired to be the antithesis of Dan Mullen. Dan Mullen came in to do a quick fix without really seeing a vision for the future. I don't know that people thought that at the time, but it was pretty evident about that when we started unfurling the layers of the damage that were done towards the end of his tenure at Florida. But we knew that this was going to take time. He said as much in the opening press conference. And I understand that there are going to be some fans who are going to use that as, well, he's just, trying to buy himself a couple of bad years before he gets fired. I really think that the key to look at is that last year, with maybe 4 or 5 exceptions, maybe 6, overwhelming majority of the most consistent and the best players on the field were handpicked Billy Napier guys. Ricky Pearsall, transfer. Trevor Etienne, true freshman. Montrell Johnson, transfer. Devin Moore, true freshman. Kamari Wilson, true freshman. Osiris Torrance, transfer. Chris McClellan, true freshman. Shamar James, true freshman, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. There are a lot of those guys that Napier himself went out and got for himself that produced at a high level consistently throughout the course of the year. And that was after one offseason of massive turnover. Now he's done that a second time. He has done a second roster overhaul. So there's going to be a lot higher of a percentage of guys on his team in 2023 that he himself handpicked. So look, every coach is going to miss at some point, but there were a lot of misses that Dan Mullen was responsible for that were either maybe not the highest rated guy, or they were highly rated, but there were other red flags that he ignored. Napier doesn't do that. So I feel very confident in the quality of the take that he has been responsible for so far. I don't see a reason to think that changes moving forward. So that's why I think a lot of people are prepared for patience and not just in the apathy mode that I think, sometimes you get into when, like Tennessee, for example, when they're just bad forever and they're used to it. So they don't expect any better. I think Florida fans have real reason to see the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow here.
Just how much pressure would you say is on him in year 2? Because I know some have talked about the idea of, what would it take to get Napier fired in year 2? Which I don't think that's possible, by the way, Neil, but when you factor in the fact he's got a $31 million buyout, like there's no way Florida is paying that. But you look at next year in 2024, what that schedule provides, 11 Power 5 opponents. Again, Florida fans will have patience, like you mentioned, but that 10% that you talked about, and every fan base has it, it's loud and it talks. And some of those 10% might have influence just enough to get him run out of there if things don't get rolling quickly. I mean, what would you say? I know you just spoke on it, but what would you say is like the pressure meter? If you had to kind of set it or give an idea, what do you think that level is at right now?
2 out of 10, 2.5 out of 10. I mean, look, the obvious counter to that is don't lose to Charlotte. Don't lose to McNeese because, well, I mean, you laugh, but Florida was there. They were needing USF to mess up a field goal hold to get out of there with a win. And USF won one game all last year. So it's not like that's totally out of the realm of possibility. But I mean, preferably don't lose to Vandy again. But I mean, Florida could take a step back next year, I think, at even 5-7. It would not go over well with the fan base. But I don't think that would any worse than 5-7. I think he's in real trouble in 24. I don't think that's likely. So I happen to think that 5.5 win total is a little ridiculous. I don't think Florida is going to be a CFP team, or I don't think they'll even go 9-3. But 5.5's pretty offensively low to me. But don't have any massive collapse at the end of the year. Don't lose those sort of bye games. Preferably don't lose to Vandy, get to a bowl game, and he's fine. Now, 24, as you mentioned, there has to be significant improvement because then the guys I talked about this year, those true freshmen, well, they'll be juniors. So you're going to expect them to step up. The guys who's in this class right now is currently number 3 in the country. They're going to be sophomores. They will have been in the program for a year. There's going to be a much higher level of expectation in 24. But as far as what could happen this year to get him fired, I just think it's extremely unlikely. But if you want me to put a number on it, maybe 3-9, something like that, like catastrophe.
Right. Well, Neil, let's move on the field and what this Gators football team is going to look like in 2023. We'll start on the offensive side, of course. The headliner, I think, was Florida picking up Graham Mertz, the Wisconsin transfer at quarterback out of the portal. Montrell Johnson, Trevor Etienne, they returned to lead that rushing attack. I think one of the best 1-2 combos at the running back position in college football. You mentioned Ricky Pearsall. I think he's a guy most believe has that potential to be a breakout star in the SEC at the wide receiver position. You look up front of the offensive line, just one starter is back up front, but you do add transfers from Kentucky, Baylor, and Alabama to boost that offensive front. So, Neil, what are you expecting out of the Gators offense in 2023, and what can they do with Graham Mertz at the quarterback position?
Well, it should be worth noting that the guy from Kentucky you just mentioned, Keontae Goodwin, is actually not with the program. He is transferring again to be with his sick mother. So,
okay,
obviously wish him all the best. But that is a hit to Florida's offensive line. I mean, that's obviously secondary, but if we're talking football, that does hurt a bit. But that's why Napier went out and got a lot of that. He had a lot of offensive line transfers coming, and he signed a decent class too. I think now, you might see a guy like a Roderick Kearney as a true freshman start, whereas maybe that wasn't in the plans last year. He's probably going to see some playing time as a freshman this year. Also, Cam Waits tearing an Achilles earlier this offseason, that hurt. So the depth has taken a hit, but that's why Napier puts such a premium on overhauling that this offseason. So I think if anything, Florida's offensive line, I mean, it's going to be very difficult to replace an All-American like Osiris Torrance, but I think at worst, it'll take a slight step back. And at best, it could be even better because they're bigger now. I mean, Ethan White and Michael Tarquin were very, very good for Florida. But, I mean, Florida just replaced them with guys who are 50 pounds heavier with pure muscle. So it's kind of, unless I guess they just don't learn the system very quickly and they miss assignments, it's going to be kind of hard for them not to at least somewhat tread water there. As for Mertz, I mean, the running game is probably going to be something that Florida should lean on much more heavily this year. I thought it should have been what they leaned on more heavily last year than they did at times. I think Napier might have actually cost Florida the FSU game, at least in part, because he threw the ball so much with Richardson. But, I mean, guys like you just mentioned with Etienne and Montrell Johnson, those guys are your bell cows. They're the bell cows of the entire offense. Ricky Pearsall is definitely a playmaker, but should be a run first team for Florida that I think as long as those two stay healthy and the offensive line and blocking for them stays healthy, that alone could be worth 6 or 7 wins.
Neil, it's list season, obviously, at this point in the offseason. Let me ask you this, because I've put out a quarterback rankings list. Many others have as well. How does it make Gators fans and you specifically feel to see Graham Mertz ranked 14th in the SEC amongst starting quarterbacks?
That's ridiculous. I don't think he's top 5. He may not be top 10, but I mean, some of the guys that are ahead of him on that list are just that's insulting. I mean, look, he's not a terrible, or he wasn't terrible at Wisconsin. I don't expect him to come in and be an interception machine. I just think that, you know, the question with him is that his ceiling and his floor may not be too far apart, and they're not exactly in the Heisman category. So he might just be a game manager. He might be a perfectly average quarterback, and you can win 10, 11 games if you have the right defense, which we'll talk about in a minute. And you have an offensive line that can block for your running game. That's a question, the defense, I'm saying. But, I mean, you just don't have to, you know, just don't lose games. And I think if Graham Mertz can do that, then, I mean, he's probably worth being in the top 10 just for that, because there are quarterbacks in the SEC that I'm sure are going to throw a bunch of interceptions this year because they panic, and their stats will be worse, and their fans will not think of them as highly as they think of other QBs in the country.
Speaking of that defense, Neil, let's move to that side of the ball. And you look at last year, Florida allowed opponents to convert 49% of their third downs. They allowed 30 or more points in 6 of their losses. Billy Napier went out and hired a 29-year-old Austin Armstrong as his defensive coordinator. And he was a guy that really, I feel like, took social media by storm because of the spring game and what have you. Very, very fiery guy on the sideline. You got 7 newcomers up front. You mentioned Billy Napier absolutely hammered the transfer portal. That's led by Memphis transfer Cam Jackson. Was a really, really big pickup up front for Florida. Princely, how do you say his last name? You want to pronounce this? Uman
Mielen.
Uman Mielen.
Yeah.
Uman Mielen. Princely Uman Mielen leads the defense at the jack position, 9.5 tackle for loss a season ago. Jason Marshall Jr., Jaden Hill, Kamari Wilson all return in the secondary for you guys as well. So you mentioned the defense is a question mark. You got a 29-year-old defensive coordinator. What's the Gators defense look like this fall?
So I think schematically it's not going to change that much. I think that's part of why Florida brought him in. I think Napier was actually very happy with the scheme that Patrick Toney brought to Florida. I think in some cases you had guys who were still, I don't want to say scarred, but from Todd Grantham, but it was a big adjustment to switch from that basically what I call the turnover points defense, because that's pretty much the result every time with him, to a defense that relies a lot more on assignment-based football and using intelligence, which is a lot for them to pick up. And it didn't go very well. So I think Napier was very happy he did that, because now he's not going to have to switch the scheme again. Austin Armstrong, I mean, he'll bring blitzes. He will every now and then bring a corner blitz, just to keep the opposing offense a little bit guessing game. But I think the growth of the players from year to year is going to be what determines this team's success on defense. Because I mean, we saw a guy last year in Trey Dean, who is a 5th-year senior, talented for sure, fast. He could tackle well. He could. That's the key word. Could. Didn't always, but could. He could cover 30 yards to bring down someone that you never thought he had a chance to get. But there were a lot of missed assignments. There were a lot of missed tackles in there. And now you have a lot of guys, I think, as I said at the start of the show, that produce consistently, that are going to be a larger percentage of the defense right now for Florida. So I think the expectations are that it's going to be a better defense, because it has to be. I think the reasonable expectation is that it should be top 40-ish, top 50 maybe in the country, because if you just cut the busted assignments down and other teams may just beat you because they make plays, so be it. But that's going to be what Florida is going to be okay with giving up yards for, not because of 6 or 7 missed assignments in a game, which was what happened the last 5 years.
Neil, moving to the special team side of things, Jeremy Crawshaw returns your punter, 47.9 yard per punt average last year. There's a battle at kicker in Gainesville between Adam Mihalik and Trey Smack. And of course, Trevor Etienne and Henderson lead the return game, if you will. So anything stand out for Florida in regards to special teams this upcoming season?
Yeah, I mean, the kicker position is going to be a battle for sure. Mihalik has a leg. He's got the distance to hit from 55 or so. It's just not always accurate. So, I mean, Trace Mack also has that. He also has distance with his leg. We don't know if he's accurate because we haven't seen him do it yet. So we'll have to see how that goes. And there's really not a way to know until you see them do it in a game, which is kind of unfortunate because you can simulate it or try to simulate it and practice all you want, but that is just not a substitute for the pressure that I think comes with being on the road in Williams-Brice or Death Valley or Jacksonville, Florida, Georgia, and with knowing what rides on your kick and knowing how you do then. So Florida's just going to have to wait and see there. I feel pretty confident with Jeremy Crawshaw as the punter. He's been a punter for 3 years now for Florida. So, I mean, we pretty much know what we have there. He's got a very good leg. It does work directionally. He can do the coffin corner punts where there's just no return and opponents have to start inside their own 15 or so. So Florida should feel good about that return game. I mean, that's a question. I mean, Florida lost the game last year because of that. Jason Marshall trying to field a punt inside his own 5, which never should have been attempted, but just I guess a mental lapse there more than anything else. But I mean, assuming that doesn't happen, I think Florida's punt return game will be fine. I don't know that there's necessarily maybe if someone like a Eugene Wilson gets involved there, a true freshman, maybe they can have a big play threat there, but I don't know that that's something Florida's putting a premium on the way that South Carolina does. It used to be. You remember, special teams used to be our thing in the Urban Meyer years. We actually saved the national championship season because of that against you guys in 06, but I haven't seen evidence that there's that much of importance being placed on it so far.
So, Neil, Florida returned 7 starters this season, 3 on the offensive side, 4 on the defense, and the Gators are looking to avoid 3 straight losing seasons for the first time since the 1950s. You look at this 2023 schedule. Let's break it down, Neil. Of course, you kick off this season at Utah, and Florida really stole headlines in week 1 of the college football season last year when they took down the Utah Utes, and you're thinking to yourself, oh my goodness, Billy Napier's got it rolling in year 1. Now you make that return trip to Utah August 31st, which I cannot wait to watch, by the way. Going to be a great game. Then McNeese State at home, Tennessee at home in week 3. Did not realize, Neil, that the Vols have not won in the Swamp since 2003. That blew my mind. That was a crazy stat. Charlotte at home at Kentucky, Vandy. You get your then at South Carolina, of course, then the bye week. Then you got Georgia in the world's largest outdoor cocktail party. Arkansas at home from the West, really interesting game there. At LSU the following week, at Missouri, and then Florida State at home. How do you feel that schedule shakes out, Neil? We've seen it from different publications that the Gators have the toughest schedule in college football. Would you agree? And again, how do you think the schedule sets up for Florida in year 2 of Billy Napier?
I don't agree that it's the toughest. I mean, just because Florida's not in the SEC West, I mean, having to draw Alabama and Georgia, I think kind of makes Auburn earn that distinction alone. But I mean, the way I would break it down is I see 2 cupcakes sort of baked in there. I know I say that very cautiously after last year with USF, but I think we can reasonably assume that won't happen again. Charlotte, McNeese State should be wins. I'm willing to trade in, or not trade it, but I'm willing to say that LSU and Georgia are probable losses. I think most Gator fans would take that in exchange for beating FSU, Tennessee, Arkansas, and Vandy. You got to protect your home turf. Those games are all in the Swamp. If Florida loses those 2 at LSU, and it always sucks losing to Georgia, but I mean, they are kind of the team that runs the sport right now. So it's reasonable to assume that Florida gets all of its, I would say, aside from LSU, Florida gets most of its toughest opponents in the Swamp. Tennessee, the team that, I mean, was a CFP team until the very end of the season last year, ranked number 1 in November. They come to the Swamp. FSU, listen to their fans tell it, they're kings of the sport right now. They're certainly acting like it. They come to the Swamp. Weird game against Arkansas, but They come to the Swamp. And I mean, we can't make fun of Vanderbilt right now because they beat us last year. That return game was in the Swamp. The road games are where it gets tricky. We don't know the health of Cam Rising right now. So that kind of puts a big question mark into that Utah game. If he does not play, or if he plays, but he's not really close to full health, very reasonable to think that Florida could win that. At Kentucky, I know they've beaten us twice in a row, but Florida, certainly from a talent standpoint, you don't expect them to lose to them again. And I mean, Missouri, weird game, could be cold to the end of the season. That could always throw a monkey wrench into things. Then you guys, that's, I think, one of the keys. I think that is one of the X factors. Probably that, Tennessee and FSU are the three games that, which result happens more? Does Florida win two of those three, or do they lose two of those three? I think determines if the season's ultimately successful or not.
Now, Neil, you talk about that game in Columbia. Let's move to that, because what I think is so interesting, Neil, I look at South Carolina's schedule and I view the game on Rocky Top against Tennessee as one that, while I list it as a toss-up, and I think revenge factor gets overplayed in college football, right? Like, if you're not already fired up to play, what is bulletin board material? What is the revenge factor? Once that ball's kicked off, you're just back to playing football, and it's whoever executes at a higher level is going to win the game. But I look at that game for South Carolina. I've said it all offseason. After last year, Tennessee's got that game circled. If there's one game I expect them to play their best, their stadium to be packed, it's that one against the Gamecocks. Hence why I have picked Tennessee to win that game and win that game by double digits. Do Florida fans in any way, after last year, 38-6 at the Swamp, do they look at the South Carolina game the same way? Obviously, Gamecock fans have revenge on the mind. What are the thoughts around the game as a whole? And do you think revenge factor is a thing in college football? And would you think revenge factor is a factor in this ball game this fall?
I think it's a factor to the degree that we can reasonably expect South Carolina to just not completely self-destruct at every available turn. I think that they will play better reasonably under their home lights. I mean, with their home fans on their home turf. They'll be hearing about last year. They'll be drilled in fundamentals. Hey, ball security. You fumbled 3 possessions in a row last year. Maybe let's not do that this time. Rattler will probably take a little bit more time to study the Florida defense just because he didn't look very comfortable last year. So he'll be drilled into it. Hey, you didn't look good against Florida last year. So maybe in that sense, but I think once the game kicks off, we're going to see a lot more even of a game. And Florida last year, by the way, didn't play especially fantastic against you guys either. 3 turnovers in a row inside your 30, and 2 of them we didn't get any points out of. Also had a punt blocked, fumbled a punt, and fumbled a snap or another field goal attempt. So plenty for Florida to clean up too. So I think Florida will look at that too from a special teams standpoint and say, hey, special teams were kind of terrible for us last year, especially toward the end of the year. Maybe we have to work on that a lot more this offseason too. So I think that it's going to mean that Florida should not expect the game to be a walkover, but I don't know that I would say that it's a game that Florida can expect to lose just because we embarrassed them last year. I don't think the revenge factor works that way.
And you look at this game, you mentioned, Neil, the challenges of playing at Williams-Brice Stadium, especially if that game is at night. Carolina also, Neil, fun fact, is 15-2 off a bye week since 2009. The Gamecocks will have the bye week before Florida. And what I think is interesting on the Gators schedule, this is the last game because as I mentioned, before Florida hits their bye week and takes on the Georgia Bulldogs. So when I look at the Florida schedule, if they're going to hit that over 5.5, they're going to overachieve. They're going to overachieve from the 5th in the SEC East that the media picked them at SEC Media Days. That South Carolina game is a really, really, really big swing game for the Gators and the Gamecocks, I would say. Neil, I've actually labeled this game the most important game of South Carolina's season. I think it's a huge swing game for Florida as well. When you look at there's the bye, then Georgia, Arkansas, at LSU, at Mizzou, Florida State. It could really set Florida up for a big finish to the 2023 season.
Certainly. I think that you might not be totally truthful right there. I think we all know that the most important game for you guys is Clemson every year. I've lived in South Carolina for a year now, so I've learned that that's the case. But
Well, see, Neil, that'd be boring, man, content-wise. I can't just say the same game every year. To your point, though, just on a quick side note, if you're not, I mean, I feel like this goes for almost any team. If your team's not winning the championship, what's the next best thing they can do? Beat the arch rival. I mean, that almost goes for anybody.
and keep them from winning a championship. I get it. I get it. But I definitely saw the results that that you guys put a lot of emphasis on that game last year. I've seen no shortage of merchandise celebrating that. Some of which comes from you. But I mean, yeah, Florida, I think part of why I think that the 5.5 win total is so crazy is I will say I do not think this is likely, but it's certainly possible that Florida hits it before their bye. There's no game, especially if Cam Rising does not play for Utah. It's possible that Florida comes into that game without a loss. I mean, Kentucky, they could win that game on the road, certainly not out of the realm of possibility. Tennessee, that's in the swamp, certainly could win that. There are 2 cupcakes baked in there. That's 2 of them. Then you got to beat Vandy. I don't think Florida loses to them twice. I mean, it's not totally unrealistic to think that Florida could be unbeaten going into the South Carolina game. And if Florida goes and they win that, now all of a sudden you're way ahead of schedule. Even if you have 1 loss heading into South Carolina, you're way ahead of schedule now. You're looking at, hey, 1 game at a time. We can't look too far ahead, but we can kind of look a little down the road. And we know now that if we win this game, we go to Jacksonville with that being everything. That is this season. All the goals that the Florida Gators list every season, national championship, SEC championship, that's all on the line now. That's all in the realm of possibility, mathematically speaking, when we go to Jacksonville. So let's take care of business today. But we do that and we unlock those doors. So Florida, I think, will probably lose one of those games I was talking about, Utah, Kentucky, or Tennessee. I think they will lose one of them at least. But Florida's season could certainly be heading in a direction that if they win that South Carolina, like heading into the South Carolina game, if they win that game, they will suddenly be thinking that things are a lot rosier in Gainesville than they were 9 months before. So it's huge for sure. Florida also doesn't really win there anymore. We're, I think, 2-4 in the last 6 times we've gone there. So we'll see.
Neil Schulman of inallkindsofweather.com breaking down the Florida Gators. Neil, I appreciate you taking the time. Let everyone know where they can check out your work.
Of course. So inallkindsofweather.com is where we put our written thoughts on the Florida Gators. Our Twitter is @allkindsweather. Our Instagram is @allkindsweatherblog. We mostly just post our graphics there, our score graphics, and maybe some other news here and there, but mostly Twitter, and Facebook is In All Kinds of Weather. YouTube just launched a second YouTube channel specifically for podcasts. I had been uploading mostly just old Gator football games on the initial YouTube. So that one is In All Kinds of Weather. The podcast one where we'll put our audio or video thoughts on the Gators is the In All Kinds of Weather Forecast, which is also the name of our podcast. That was a lot, I know, but looking forward to having you back on our show. This is always fun to chop it up with you, and looking forward to a fun season ahead.
Okay, that was Neil Schulman in allkindsofweather.com. Appreciate Neil taking the time. That was not Chris Marler, Austin Gregory. No, that was Neil Schulman in allkindsofweather.com helping us break down the Florida Gators, the Gamecocks Week 7 matchup. But to Week 1, we go. South Carolina, North Carolina, game day in Charlotte, North Carolina. How about that? College game day is on the way to the Queen City. You love to see it. You absolutely love to see it, man. You know, it makes a lot of sense. One of the few top 25 matchups out there. Going to be a blast, though. Going to be a blast, man. You know, it's just always fun when you get game day. You know, a primetime type of game, 7:30 kickoff in the Queen City. And I know Charlotte will put on one hell of a show for College Game Day, and you just add even more hype and excitement. And, of course, it's great exposure for South Carolina football and Shane Beamer and everything they're doing. So going to be a lot of fun, man. Game day is going to be incredible. I'm sure the signs will be epic, and cannot wait to wake up on that first full Saturday, because we got one Saturday before that, right? We got one Saturday with the Vanderbilt-Hawaii game and some others. But the first full Saturday, week 1 of the college football season, to wake up, to take that in, to watch that, it's going to be absolutely awesome, man. Cannot wait to see it. Cannot wait to see it. Guys, in just a couple of minutes, we will have my good friend Chris Marler of College Football Uncensored of Saturday Down South. What am I? I'm messing up Chris Marler's title today. Most notably, though, canceled on Twitter as of this morning. I guess you can no longer find him at Vern Funquist. I don't know what it is. Things are always happening to Chris Marler. So in the next minute or two, we will get Chris on. No rush for Marler. I know he's working to jump on the show, but yeah, going to be a lot of fun. Going to be a really, 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 really fun conversation. Austin Gregory says, I will get a TSUS sign on College Game Day. Please do. Hey, who? Austin, somebody has to have a Beamer Ball to the Moon sign. Somebody has to. And if you put it, hey, if you make one for game day, send me a picture and we'll repost it. Yeah, absolutely, man. Would love to do that. Would love to do that. Absolutely. Anyways, guys, continue to leave your questions, your comments. Call us and leave a voicemail if you cannot get in that third hour, of course. Let's see. Just going back through your questions, everything else. Who's bringing the Big Cock Club flag to Charlotte for game day? Brendan, that's the question that we need the answer to. That is absolutely the question that we need the answer to. Let me just real quick, guys. I'm going to try to, because it's funny. I tried to post the game day video, and of course, it did not work on Instagram. I'm going to get this picture out there. Bruin Nation says, Chris's head on a stick 20 feet in the air. Bruin Nation, I'll pay somebody if you do that. I will pay you to do that. I will pay you, man. I like that. Would there be anything funnier, Bruin Nation? Like, honestly, would there be anything funnier? I don't think so. I don't think so. Okay, we got to email the link over to Austin Gregory, and I will 110% supply the headshot, my friend. All right, we got to email the link to Marler. Let's see. Okay, I don't want to give his email. I was about to say his email out loud. I don't know that he wants his email out there shared to everybody. Okay, here we go. Again, guys. Oh, he got it. Never mind. Again, guys, appreciate you all tuning in. Really excited to talk SEC football, South Carolina football with Chris Marler, College Football Uncensored, and Saturday Down South. Did a great job covering SEC Media Days. Very pumped to get him on. Austin says Chris's are always getting canceled. Ha. You know, I will say this, Austin, at the risk of jinxing it, things have been much more calm on the social media side of things in regards to like TSUS and what have you. I think y'all understand the rest. Again, guys, in case you missed it, College Game Day will be coming to the Queen City, South Carolina, and North Carolina in Charlotte, as if we needed more to be excited about when it comes to college football season. College Game Day will be in the Queen City for week 1. With that being said, he joins the show, and I first want to say this. The best ability is availability. So when you hit somebody up and they're willing to jump on the show, that really does mean a lot. We had to call an audible, right? Obviously, our normal Monday guest, weekly guest, Mark Rogers, he's doing things with Big Ten Media Days, and we wish him well. But I was like, you know, I don't want to just do the 2-hour show. Let's get a guest on. Who can we talk some SEC football with? One of the best in the business. He joins us of College Football Uncensored, Saturday Down South, and no longer of Twitter, Chris Marler. Chris, what's going on, my friend? How are you?
The first thing I heard when I came on here was things have been calmer on social media for us. And I'm like, that's nice. Good for you.
The irony, Chris, that you obviously, again, appreciate you taking the time, and it's a pleasure to talk with you, speak with you. It was great seeing you at SEC Media Days. But the irony of I reach out to you, you agree to come on the show, and it's funny. I'm just like scrolling, and you had dropped a joke, not a harmless joke, by the way, but just a joke. And I was like, oh, that's funny. Let me just click on Marler's profile, whatever, see what's going on.
Yeah.
And then the account suspended thing came up. And so you were unaware, obviously. It was something to do with like Alabama and Tennessee, maybe, but it was harmless. I mean, just flat out harmless. I don't even remember what it was. Yeah. I doubt that's what got you suspended. But
there's no
why does Elon Musk hate you? Should we start there? I don't know. I mean,
I don't like. This is the second time in 3 months this has happened, and it was deserved last time. Last time I made a bad April Fool's joke about a Kirby Smart sex tape that was I thought funny that few other people did. That's fine. That's my fault. This is like there's no they never gave me a reason or anything. And I tell you what, it's funny because it's me, and it's like, I have like this like battle back and forth with Twitter or whatnot. But at the same time, like, I mean, part of that's my livelihood, man. Like that's what we do for content and stuff like that for College Football Uncensored, the podcast, and for me personally. So it's just frustrating because I don't know. I just had to restart a whole new account, and I don't want to do that again going into the season. But whatever. At this point, I just. Do
you think they're like? I wonder.
Championships. This is the world we live in now.
I don't know, man. I'm like, I just wonder if. Which, to your point, by the way, you think about it. I mean, there are there's a number of Gamecock fans who despise me, but I think about this when you're pissing off the entire SEC practically. Like it's a different family. I think about like SEC. Not you. I'm just saying. Like I'm thinking in general. I'm actually thinking for myself because at some point I'll probably be at that point where. You basically like when you're, this as well as anybody, man. Like when you're talking SEC football, it's not about if, it's a matter of when. Like you're going to piss off every SEC fan base at some point based off something you said.
It's worse than politics.
Right. Imagine all 14 of those fan bases coming at you. Like I could see why like your social media is getting flagged. It's like you got all these people, whatever. But again, I don't think you did anything. I don't know what Elon Musk decided. He had a to-do list. It was like rebrand Twitter to X.com. Get rid of Vern Funquist. That was like the second thing.
I just don't get it. Yeah, the whole thing is stupid. Hopefully it'll get sorted out and it'll be fine. Because what's crazy too is, all jokes aside, when I had to restart the account, like that last account, I mean, I was a pretty big. I mean, like I'm kind of an asshole in general. It's whatever. Like I'm just very sarcastic and like my responses to people. And I try to pride myself on being like objectively truthful. And that hurts a lot of people's feelings. If you don't say just nice stuff about their team constantly, it seems like it's always like, I wasn't making a joke when I say that college football media is worse than politics because it's not every 4 years. It's every year. I mean, I got like harassed to the point where my mom had to get off Twitter last year by Tennessee fans just because I was right in predicting something that happened to them against Georgia. It's fine. Hopefully it'll work itself out. It's good to be here. It was great to see you in Nashville. I hope all of I'm living in Columbia now. And I apologize for the shirt. It's laundry day, but the excitement for the season, man, has been like kind of palpable over here in the city.
Yeah, then you get College Game Day in the Queen City, of course. But Marler, I want to do a little bit of a run around the SEC with you. Of course, we got Chris Marler in College Football Uncensored. Just really quickly, obviously, we're talking the Monday after SEC Media Days. We'll start with Ole Miss. Lane Kiffin goes on his rants about NIL, transfer portal, which a lot of that had to do with the media that was asking him questions. I don't know how many different ways he can talk about the same subject over and over again. I think the biggest takeaway, like looking at him, not really buttoned up, the hair's kind of all over the place, and of course, like almost the yo mama thing when somebody said, I look a lot like you. Hey, what's your mom's name? But your takeaways from Lane Kiffin talking about his Ole Miss football team. Again, unfortunately, the thing I hated more than anything, there wasn't a lot of football talk when it came to what Kiffin had to say.
I enjoyed it because I think that people are having a hard time understanding that, like, to separating of like, all right, these coaches are going to talk about NIL. And here's the thing. This happened a lot with Saban. I like the whole thing all offseason. Saban's complaining about NIL. Is he complaining about it, or is he telling you all of the problems that are very real in NIL? And by the way, I realized this last night we talked about on the newest episode of the podcast. He's the only one dealing with it. None of us are. So it's like we're sitting here like, I can't believe he's complaining about this ball. He's the only one these guys are the only ones dealing with it on a daily basis. We're like out here doing our jobs at fucking H&R Block, excuse my language, or whatever, right? Like, we're not dealing with NIL on a daily basis. You go into media stuff and you're asked a question and then you have to answer the question. So it's not like they're like, hey, Nick, or hey, Lane, how's your banana pudding? Let me just tell you something about how much I hate kids getting paid. Like, that's not happening. So the Lane Kiffin thing, I think he's a better vessel for the message than somebody like Nick Saban, because he's not as old. People like him. If you would have told me that 10, 15 years ago that he would be the guy to be the voice of this, like, that you would want to choose, I would think you're crazy, because people hated Lane Kiffin, but he's now become this very funny, transparently, like, joking, like, character on social media. And a lot of times people like really, really resonate with that, especially from these like head coaches. All of the stuff he said is very real. He made a point that we've been talking about a lot in the offseason, and that is the fact that, like, the NIL stuff and the transfer portal were both very new, very difficult things to implement, that the NCAA just dropped at once and then just washed their hands of the situation and then did nothing. So it's like you have two very new things that are not being regulated at all, and you don't know how to regulate it, and they're in their infancy stages, right? Like, so it's like, how do we do this? Like, what are the best practices? Like, it's going to be a minute before any of that's figured out. And you have both of those happening at the same exact time. That's a tough thing for coaches. And I make this sort of as a joke, but it's also very real. You saw it with the shit with the Titanic stuff. People don't feel bad for rich people. Like, people don't feel bad for coaches. They're making $7, $8, $9, $10 million. So they don't feel bad for like any of the stuff they're having to go through. But these are real issues that need to be figured out. And just because they need to be regulated doesn't mean the kids don't need to get paid or you need to put a cap over it. But there's got to be some solution. And I think right now, when you talk about the voice of the league, I think Kiffin's probably like the best person to do this, because he's a likable guy and he's younger and probably appeals to that audience. But here's the thing, man. If you are being very objective and honest about it, it's something that impacts the entire country for college football. And it changes and is different from a state by state, team by team, conference by conference way, to where the rules are made up however you want to. The NCAA tried to come in and tell A&M, like, hey, you're not allowed to do this anymore. And they're like, yeah, we are. We're going to listen to like this Texas legislation. That's where we're going to go. Like, it's the NCAA is obsolete at this point.
So we're going to go back and forth, Marler, between East and West. I think it'll be fun. Vanderbilt in the East. I loved what Clark Lee had to say. I was able to ask him a question, which was really, really cool. But I just love his charisma, his excitement about Vanderbilt. Like, you're at a Vandy. Everybody expects you to get up to the podium. Well, if we win 2 or 3 games, we'll be happy. No, he gets up there and says we want to be the best program in college football. Like, 5-7 is not good enough. It's not the standard.
Yeah.
And I feel like, Chris, you can really – he's coming into year 3. Vandy, of course, was picked to finish 7th in the East. We all expected that. But the fact that that you kind of have to think about it for a moment before you put them at 7, I think is a testament to the job that he's already doing. Your thoughts on Clark Lee and just Vanderbilt as a whole? There are many problems beyond Clark Lee that Vandy has to figure out to make any sort of noise. They're trying to invest in their football facilities, obviously, but just overall impressions of Clark Lee at Media Days.
First off, shout out Austin Gregory over here in the comments, because he's fantastic, and I appreciate all the love. And I really, the comments back to back about Marler. Someone told me you're going 7-5 this year, and then College Football Uncensored and Chris Marler getting censored. That's very good stuff, and it's always good to talk to Austin. I genuinely appreciate that. No, the Vandy stuff is now, the whole thing about them getting votes was horseshit. That was like by a select few people in the media that were just doing this as a joke. And I know who did it. I respect those guys. I like those guys as actual people, like, and people in the business. I'm not saying that media stuff needs to be taken, like the big J journalist stuff needs to be taken seriously. Like, I mean, like, I've made an entire career off of not doing that. But that being said, going there and just making a mockery of the whole situation, I thought was pretty stupid. I just thought that whole situation was pretty stupid. Now going into Vandy, like, it's kind of crazy to think about. They went 5-7 last year. It doesn't, because that's, I mean, you're talking about one game away from getting to a bowl. You beat Florida. Everyone remembers the most just mundane milquetoast storming of the field ever. Just single file line fire drill from elementary school, storming of the field. That part was incredible. There's a lot of uphill battles for Vandy, but here's the thing too about Vanderbilt. There's a time when Georgia Tech was really good in the late 90s, and I compare those schools because the academics are very, very tough, right? But if you are trying to appeal to a kid, I know that everyone's trying to get paid and go to the league and all that kind of stuff. The bottom line is not everyone's going to be able to do that. Selling a kid on going to Nashville for 3 to 5 years, getting a degree from Vanderbilt, that's a good sell. I'm not sure how marketable that is to everyone across the board, but like I've always been surprised they haven't been able to recruit better just because I know how bad they can be, but I don't like with Clark Lee there. I'm not convinced just because they went 5-7 last year, they're going to go 7-5 this year or go to a bowl or anything like that. I do think he's got to head in the right direction. They've played better, and they got a couple of dudes, man. I mean, Will Shepard's a good receiver. I know they lost, the running back and everything like that over to Kentucky. But I mean, I think that he is a good, the mindset is there, right? Like no one's going to tell Clark Lee he can't do it. And I think that is something that when you are going, it doesn't feel like coach speak when he says stuff. It feels like he genuinely believes it. Now he may be crazy for actually believing it because Vanderbilt's never going to be the best team in the country at anything besides hot dog sales outside the stadium. I can attest to that. But I mean, other than that, I think, they're very, it's a very big uphill battle, but I think he might be the right guy for the fit.
Hot dog sales and best road trip in the SEC. I think Vandy will always win those, but in regards to winning games, I think you're right, Marler. Which, by the way, Nashville was an incredible host city. I wish I could have came out and enjoyed karaoke, but of course, with Beamer speaking Thursday, I was like, I don't know that this really fits well with the schedule. I need to be on point. So maybe next year in Dallas. Either way, going back to the West, the Auburn Tigers, Marler, one of your favorite teams. No. We played a game of stock up, stock down on Friday on the show, and I talked about stock down for me coming out of media days was Auburn.
Yeah.
Not because,
really?
We all know the roster. Well, we all know the roster issues, and it's year one of Freeze, but I've seen like our guy Jake Crane talk about Auburn being an 8-win team, and they're getting their hopes up there for sure. But when I heard Hugh Freeze preaching patience and basically pleading with the fan base, and I know it's coach speak, but still, when you're standing up there at the podium and you're saying, hey, we need the Auburn fan base to be patient.
Right.
I don't know, man. To me, it's like you are openly saying that like the roster, he said he's never come into a season with more questions than they have right now.
Yeah.
I'm not saying Auburn can't get to that 7-5 and God forbid maybe 8-win mark, but I don't know. For me, I think probably going to a bowl game in year one of Hugh Freeze, I think he's trying to set the expectations very realistically because obviously the last thing you want to do is go 7-5 and fans be disgruntled, right? So I think he's trying to keep it in check. Your biggest rivals are Georgia, Alabama. Let's not get out ahead of ourselves. But your overall thoughts on Auburn and the fact that Hugh Freeze is back in the SEC.
So a really good point that you're making because that was not my takeaway. I've been really high on Auburn all offseason. I think that like Hugh Freeze pointed on something, and now that you mention it, it's like kind of like, I can think of some of the stuff that he was saying, and it's a really good point, like I said, that you're making because he brought up something about how he used to be one of the best play callers in the country. He considered himself one of the best play callers in the country, and that's something we really haven't thought about in about 8 years. But if you think about this, 2015, that 2015 Ole Miss team led the SEC in everything, points, yards. Hugh Freeze is the only person to put up multiple wins against Alabama with a 40-point. Like they beat Georgia in year one of the Kirby Smart era, like 45-14. Like beat them like a drum. I mean, just like a drum. Mm-hmm. Put up 40 points over Bama, I think twice, which is tough to do, obviously, or close to 40 at least. I'm impressed with what he's been able to do since he started because he has gotten into the portal and he has turned around the recruiting immediately, especially where it's important, like in like the most important parts, and that is on the offensive line and defensive line. He got more guys in the offensive line in his tenure there, which is like what 8 months in, than Harsin did his entire time he was in Auburn. Like that's incredible. Maybe I should be more worried about what he was saying. You always say the devil's in the details. Maybe some of the stuff that he was saying, like stuff reading in between the lines that maybe they aren't ready to take that jump. I will say this, Hugh Freeze has been a mastermind when it comes to quick turnarounds. And you look at what he did at Arkansas State and you look at what he did at Ole Miss. Arkansas State had one winning season in the previous 23 years before Hugh Freeze got there. They had 0 in the 15 before it. The only one they had, by the way, was a 6-5 year in 1995. Okay. Hugh Freeze comes in and wins 10 games immediately. Ole Miss, people forget, Ole Miss had back-to-back losing seasons and had a losing record in 6 of their 8 previous years before Hugh Freeze got there. If first year he gets there, they go 7-6, they go to a bowl game. They were 1-15 in the 2 years combined in the SEC before he got there. They win 3 SEC games, they win the Egg Bowl, they get to a bowl game, win that. Very impressive and quick turnaround. I don't know if he's going to be able to do, or win 8-9 games at Auburn, but I look at that schedule and I don't see how he loses 6. I think 7-5 is kind of the floor. Now, that being said, 8-4 is probably the ceiling. But when I look at the schedule, there's a very real chance that he is going to have that team. Auburn is so big on just like momentum. It's like the best way I know how to put it is like nobody gets caught up in the wave of emotion and let it affect them more. Besides like softball umpires in the Women's College World Series who just like the crowd makes the calls at that point. Auburn will ride the wave of momentum and energy from that fan base like no other team in the country. And there's a very real chance they can win 5 games in a row going into Bama in Jordan-Hare at the end of the season, which is a nightmare for the team on my shirt right here.
To your point, Marler, again, Hugh Freeze is one of, I think he's the only coach right now that's active that has multiple wins over Nick Saban, or he's one of like 3 coaches or something. Yeah. Either way, you have multiple wins over Nick Saban. You're one of the best. You're one of the best. Back to the East, Marler, the Missouri Tigers, I think, are really intriguing. Picked to finish 6th in the SEC East by the media, which surprised me. They're 6th for me, and I have it because of the tiebreaker. I have Florida 5th. I have the tiebreaker. So I got Mizzou with a better overall record, but Florida finishing 5th because I feel like the SEC is dumb, and that's how things don't work out. Either way, Mizzou is definitely a team that's interesting. When you have that much returning experience on the defensive side, over 80%, I think it is, and that's that defense was ranked top 20 in the country, very top of the SEC. Quarterback's the big question. Brady Cook, we think and we believe, is going to be QB1. Your thoughts on Mizzou, and tell me why I'm wrong that I believe Eli Drinkwitz is just the Jeff Fisher of college football. He's guaranteed to go 500 every year.
I mean, that's pretty good. That's pretty good.
You can take that one. You can take that one if you want. You can take
good. I'm good. Unless I have to rebrand my whole self again, maybe I will. I can use all the help I could get. No, I think that Drinkwitz is like slept on a bunch. Like they have not had a good quarterback situation there. People forget that they've won like 6 of the last 8 against Arkansas. Like they've owned Arkansas.
They've won 4 in a row against South Carolina. Won 4 in a row against the Gamecocks.
They have right now?
Yes, they've run a 4-game winning streak. And Eli Drinkwitz himself has won 4 in a row, dating back to 2019 when he took Appalachian State into Williams-Brice and beat Will Muschamp.
I think that God, you hate Will Muschamp. I forgot about that. I think
this on a side note, Marler. I don't know who hates who more: Gamecock fans to Will Muschamp or Arkansas fans to Chad Morris. After I went to SEC Media Days and talked to a couple of those guys, I was like, okay, this is very comparable. Yes,
bro. I asked Ty Richardson to rank in order of success. Brian Harsin, Chad Morris, and Joe Biden, and I'm pretty sure he had Morris at the bottom. And I was like, my Lord. Anyway, so here's the whole thing. With Mizzou, you hit the nail on the head. They return 8 or 9 starters, however you want to look at it, right? On the defensive side of the ball, which is a very, very good defensive unit that people really don't like. Missouri gets shit on more than any other team in the conference, and it drives me crazy because, listen, they've got more division championships than Tennessee has. I'm not going to get into their stuff with you guys, but like they've done really well against Arkansas. They've won 4 in a row against y'all, apparently, which I, again, didn't know. But, like, it's a good program. They always play Florida tough, it seems like. I mean, just every single year. I feel like that Mizzou, no matter what, just because the geographic, like, location of that state, people are going to crap on them no matter what. And also, Drinkwitz has a very punchable face, as much as I like him. I really do like him. But, he does. He looks like the guy from Wolf of Wall Street, and it's not great. But that being said, I think that, like, I think they're going to be better than people think this year. I think that this is a team that's like an 8 to 9 win, like ceiling. They're a lot like Auburn in that way. I think that might be the ceiling, but the ceiling is close to the floor. Like I don't think that the seven wins is something that's like should be scoffed at. I really don't even think 7 wins is something we should consider as like a huge success story if you're Drinkwitz. Like I think you have to get to 8 this year because they have put a lot of money into that program. People joke around about Como and how bad the stadium is. They've put a ton of money into the facilities there and upgrading those. They got Luther Bolden. I think you're really going to have a breakout year from that kid where they didn't really use him as much as they should have last year. If he can get adequate quarterback play and better like offensive line play, I think that they are going to be really, really good. They're not going to beat Georgia by any means, but they could challenge people in the East. They're better than
Now
Florida.
I think that's fair. I think that's we'll get there in a second, Marlo. Trust me. Moving to Mississippi State on the west side, I thought Zach Arnett did a really, really good job at the podium at SEC Media Days. They got a fantastic pair of linebackers on the defensive side, and he's a defensive guy. They did lose a lot, but you'd expect them to be strong there. And I think State, Marler, of course, I made Gamecock fans very happy when I picked State to pull the upset at Williams-Brice Stadium. I think Will Rogers is one of the most slept-on quarterbacks in the SEC. But it's a really tough situation. I mean, Arnett taking over the Pirate, the late, great Mike Leach, rest in peace. Your thoughts on what he had to say at Media Days and just the situation at Mississippi State. Do you think, my biggest question is just, is he the long-term answer? Like, I think he was the right guy to fill in immediately, but long-term, going away from Air Raid, Kevin Barbay is going to take over and, do the whole pro-style thing. And so it'll be so you ask yourself, like, we know Will Rogers is good, but like, is the offensive line geared to do that? Are the receivers, are the pieces in place geared to make this radical shift? Your thought on Mississippi State this season, who was picked 7th in the SEC West by the media?
Yeah, that's where I had them. And it's not even a dig at Mississippi State. It's not. You return, like you said, 2 really good linebackers, top 2 tacklers, returning leaders at that stat in the entire conference. I think that part's great. I think that, like, when you look at Mississippi State, there's a lot of similarities. I always say this is South Carolina. I always say Mississippi State is the South Carolina of the West and vice versa, because South Carolina, they both 2 programs that have a lot of pride and a lot of like great fans that are very loyal year in, year out. But if we're also being honest, it's 2 programs that have, I don't want to say underachieved, but they've just kind of been a little bit middle of the road for a lot of years. They've spiked. But like,
to your point,
more success, Mississippi
not
State.
To cut you off, Marlon, but to your point, like the numbers indicate what you are saying is correct. I'll let you go ahead. But
numbers, everything I say is well thought out.
Indeed. I even compare. You could even look at like the run they had under Mullen and the run under Spurrier. Like, they're very comparable.
Right. I mean, they didn't get 11 wins. I think South Carolina has been more successful than they have, especially in recent memory, including the DAC year. I know they got to number 1 in the country, but still. Anyway. But I say that because there's just like when you look up in the division for both those teams, it's tough, man. I mean, like, South Carolina has had to look up at Florida and Tennessee and Georgia ever since they've been in the SEC, and that's not easy. Like, it was way more difficult in like the 90s and 2000s, but that's not easy. In the West, you're talking about, you've got Bama, LSU, now you got A&M, Auburn. And Mississippi State's done a really good job. I love where they're at in terms of being slept on, because I think that Will Rogers continues to be the most slept on quarterback in the country. I didn't have, like, Jaden Daniels being the first team SEC quarterback was bullshit. I understand he had a great year. The fact that you have essentially 2, 3, or 4 year starters with Will Rogers and the numbers he's put up, I don't care what kind of offense it is, and then the same numbers with KJ Jefferson. I saw something that I think Connor O'Gara posted, my old co-host and friend over at SCS. He posted something about how I think Will Rogers has like 1 interception in the last 2 seasons or something in the red zone. Like, he's been incredible. That's not a system quarterback. Now, that being said, I don't know what that offense is going to look like. That is a big growing pain. That's one of the reasons you don't go to that kind of like hiring somebody like Mike Leach, and we all love him. It's like the air raid is kind of like the triple option with passing, right? Like, and you have a hard time getting out of that like system. The transition is more difficult, not as much as it would be for running the triple option, obviously, because of like the size of the lineman. I think it's going to be a year of growing pains, especially because I think that the West is really, really deep this year. But 6 wins is still on the table. Like, I mean, that could be a conference or a division where they finish last and they are 6-6 and they get to a bowl game and they still have a winning record. I don't think that's out of the question at all.
Yeah, Marler, I've got every team in the SEC West in my preseason predictions bowl eligible. So that just goes to show the depth of the conference. Who was your first team quarterback, by the way? Mine was KJ Jefferson, just FYI.
Mine was KJ Jefferson. Yeah.
Okay, fair enough. Back to the East we go. Florida Gators. You mentioned Billy Napier. This is a pivotal year too. I think the chatter, talking at SEC Media Days, he's not getting fired this year. There are 31 million reasons why he's not getting fired. They're recruiting at a high level. I think the question is, though, is he going to be there long enough to really enjoy the fruits of his labor? Because this year the schedule's brutal, as we all know. Next year it's absurd. 11 Power 5 teams. He brings in Graham Mertz as his quarterback, who he feels confident in for, I guess you could say,
Yeah,
whatever
for
reason.
whatever reason.
Your thoughts on Florida? They got a 29-year-old defensive coordinator. I mean, what does it all mean at the end of the day for the Florida Gators?
Well, one, I just realized that you brought me on to talk about the worst teams in the conference, and I don't appreciate it.
We're getting to the top. We're making our.
Okay,
I'm going off of the order of finish from the bottom to the top. We're getting there. Trust me. We're getting
there. So I think that with Florida, the thing with Billy Napier is I think he could be the right guy. I like Billy Napier. I think he's a good recruiter. I think what he did going to Florida is one of the most important blueprints for any coach making the jump from Group of 5 to Power 5 that we've ever seen. It's probably the most important. And what that is a lot of times you would see this in the past where somebody would say, hey, like, we're going to hire you as you're making the jump from, he was at University of Louisiana, right? Louisiana Lafayette, whatever you want to call it. And now you're coming to Florida in the SEC. So in the past, you would see bigger schools like that kind of take advantage of coaches in terms of what they would be allowed to pay them, what they were giving them, because it was viewed as, hey, this is such a huge opportunity for you. You're so lucky to have it. What he did when he got hired was say, I'm not taking this job unless you guys do the things to give me the resources to make me successful. Because I'm looking up at Georgia as our chief rival, and like, it is a nightmare scenario you're walking into with that team, where like the difference in like what Kirby did versus Mullen. And Mullen was a great coach, but he didn't recruit for shit. He just refused to do it. Right. Like, I think that when you look at Billy Napier, the facility upgrades, the recruiting has been really good. Hopefully he can get a quarterback and keep a quarterback. I think they got DJ Lagway right now coming in next year. Graham Mertz is not the answer. They've got a really good running back. ETN is going into, I think, his sophomore year.
And Montrell Johnson, great 1-2 punch. Great 1-2 punch there.
So maybe they have some guys that can flash. I just don't look at that schedule. There's a reason why Vegas has them at 5.5 wins. And I'm not saying Vegas is always right, but them dropping them from 6.5 to 5.5 at the start of the offseason said a lot to me. I think that they could win 6 games, and it would be one of the better coaching jobs in the SEC. That's how brutal the schedule is, and that's how much of a difficult task is at hand for Billy Napier. I like, that's not trying to be rude about the program or the state of the program, or not say, like, I mean, next year 7 wins would be, I think, like a miracle worker, like for next year with how difficult the schedule is. Because now you look up, and I'm not saying the cupboard was bare, but you didn't really do anything to restock it if you're Dan Mullen with a lot of talent. And then Napier comes in, and now you got to compete with Kirby every year. Florida State seems to be back. And for whatever reason, you can't convince me that Kirby didn't make the schedule. You just can't, because they go to Utah this year. They've had like an ankle monitor on their like them for like the first 2 weeks of the season for the last 30-something years. Like that's probably the most Florida thing about them. Like, they're not allowed to leave the state in the month of September apparently, and now they're going to Utah. That's a season, man, where you've got to be 500 getting to October, because if not, that is going to be a tough stretch for the next 2 months.
Marler, speaking, by the way, to the point of your rude takes, I know you're saving those for when we get to Georgia and Kirby Smart, so no big deal. Talking the Arkansas Razorbacks. They're kind of one of those, I view, Marler, one of those middle-of-the-pack SEC teams that there are reasons you could convince me they could win 9 games this year. There are also reasons you could tell me they're going to go 6-6 again. So you have arguably the best quarterback in the SEC in KJ Jefferson. You have Rocket Sanders, which is a guy that, as good as he is, I don't know he gets talked about enough. I think it was Cole Kubelik, I heard, made a great point that, and I noticed this too, because I was in the room and I got to ask Rocket a question about Trey Knox, but like, there was nobody around him. And you're like, this guy might be the best running back in the SEC. Like, nobody cares. So, Arkansas is a team, Sam Pittman, he's beloved. Everybody wants to see him succeed because he is just such a likable guy. But you and I both know, once the games start happening and wins and losses take place, that really kind of just goes out the window. So when you look at Arkansas, kind of where do you put them? I mean, again, they feel like one of those teams in the SEC West that you could slot them 3 through 6 and it would make sense.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's probably fair. I forgot where I had them. I want to say I had them like 6th. Arkansas,
it's tough though, because like, all those West teams almost feel like the same, like to a degree. You know what I mean? Like,
and they all have the same
somewhere between 6 to 8 wins. We're kind of all floating in that range. Like it's a
And
bunch
just,
of 50
like throw up a number and attach it to whatever shitty shade of red you want to, and just say, all right, that's got 7, that's got 8, they've got 6.
There was a lack of creativity when it came to SEC teams choosing colors. I don't know what the deal is.
The maroon is, it is the worst. Like anyway. But no, with Arkansas, I love Pittman. I think he's done just a great job, and he did a really good job so quickly compared, like, when you talk about like how much of a like the cupboard being bare there and what Chad Morris left. My God, I worry about that team because they were last in the country in pass defense, and you lose Catalan to Texas. You don't return a lot. You lose Drew Sanders. Like from a leadership standpoint, I think Bumper Pool finally, I don't know if he graduated, if he pulled a Stetson Bennett type thing, or if he was just gone, but he was there for about 18 years. So I think he's finally used up his eligibility. You don't have a lot of returning experience. Doesn't mean the defense can't be good. I think the offense is going to be so much fun to watch. I think this is about as Big 12 of a team as you can get in the SEC, because KJ Jefferson is so much fun to watch. He's going to end this season. I hate to say it. I think he's going to end the season the same way he has ended the last several seasons, which is really good quarterback, put up really good numbers. Hey, nobody noticed, because they're going to be 7-5, 6-6, like whatever. I just, that is a very, very difficult, like, again, division that you're having to play in. You get LSU in September, which sucks.
Marler, real quick to the point of Arkansas, I just wanted to, I think our guy SEC Mike made a really good point too, in the sense of that we'll learn a lot about Pittman and Arkansas this year, because this is the first time he's had to hire coordinators, and so it's like, we're dealing with that in Columbia, which we'll get into in a second. It's like you just learn a lot about a coach, I think, when okay, you hired Dan Enos, let's see how it works. You hired your new DC, let's see how it works. So I mean, that's another big story. Not to cut you off, but just on the top of mind, that's something to talk about with Arkansas for sure.
Yeah, well, and what's crazy too is that like they were one of the only, I think they were one of like 4 or 8 teams in the country that had returned their offensive and defensive coordinator for 3 consecutive years going into last season. That's crazy, right? And now you have to make this change. I'm not a Dan Enos fan at all, and that's for very personal reasons. But like, I mean, that man left in the middle of the night, like. Literally, they show up for meetings the Monday or Tuesday after the national championship, and the one where Bama got just destroyed by Clemson, and Enos packed his office in the middle of the night and bolted for Miami. Now, he's a great quarterbacks coach, fantastic quarterbacks coach, and he's got a lot to work with KJ Jefferson. I don't know what kind of play caller he is, because I haven't seen that out of him. You're losing Barry Odom. Here's what I wonder is Sam Pittman had a very valuable resource in Barry Odom, because Barry Odom was a head coach in this league, and he was the co-head coach, which is a stupid title, but at the same time, like, if you're looking to bounce ideas off a guy in like the infancy stages of your head coaching career, what better way to do that than somebody that has been in the league, has been, played like in the SEC for 4 years, or coached in the SEC for 4 years, to be your right-hand man and your defensive coordinator. Now, the defense wasn't good. So it seems like they'd be able to make some improvements there because the bar was set really low. But that's a really good point about the coordinators. We love to talk about KJ Jefferson and Rocket Sanders, but like losing Trey Knox is a big deal, for one, that we're not talking about. You saw the receivers last year, since they lost, Traylon Burks like 2 years ago. That wasn't an area of strength by any means. So I wonder what that looks like as well.
Moving back to the East, Marler, Kentucky, I think a team that maybe we're sleeping on a little bit. I don't know. Picked to finish 4th in the SEC East. Listening to Mark Stoops at the podium, and I kind of realized, I was like, man, they're going to be pretty good on offense. Devin Leary at the quarterback position comes from NC State. You got Ray Davis coming over from Vandy, Demi Sumo from NC State as well. They add a couple of transfer offensive linemen out of the portal. They got one of the best wide receiver units they've had since Mark Stoops has been there. Defensively, they should be stingy yet again. You feel like Kentucky's prime for a bounce-back season coming into 2023?
Has to be. They have one of the easiest schedules in the conference. I think it's probably up there with Georgia's. It's very similar. I think they have some of the same out of conference opponents, stuff like that. Like, Louisville may be better than some people think. I don't know. But that's a team that returns, like you pointed out at media days, they're top 5 pass catchers returning. Love what they have bringing back at running back. I'll tell you what Ray Davis is not going to do. I'll tell you what he's not going to do is fumble every GD time they get to the 1 yard line, like Chris Rodriguez did over and over and over again. The problem with Kentucky last year is they had horrible offensive line play. I kept saying this all year going into the season. You had to replace this whole big blue wall thing that they've talked about. Kentucky, I love Kentucky. I love Mark Stoops. It's a great story. It's hard to root against Kentucky. I know it might be different for you guys because of the rivalry there y'all have had. But at the same time, like, I love Mark Stoops. That big blue wall thing was like for 1 year. Okay, you lost 3 offensive linemen to the NFL, which I'm sure has probably never happened in program history. Then you have to replace them. Levis and his turnovers last year were awful. And if it wasn't him, it was Chris Rodriguez. But like, they were the worst rushing offense, I think, in the conference for most of the year, if not the entire season. And it was bad to watch. Like, no push up front. I think they're going to have a lot better of an offensive line this year. The big thing too is Leary and Cohen are going to be very tough on defensive coordinators. People have not talked about Devin Leary nearly enough. That kid had 35 touchdowns and 7 picks in his freshman year at NC State. Now you can sit here and say whatever, that's because ACC defenses, like blah, blah, blah. 35 and 7 against air is still good as a freshman quarterback in college football. And him coming in a situation where he has depth, he's more accurate. Will Levis was a 2nd-round draft pick, and they still have an upgrade at that position. But Liam Cohen coming back from an offense that was so good 2 years ago when they won 10 games, I think that Kentucky is a 9-win to 10-win team this year. Like I don't think that's like a hot take. I don't think they beat Georgia, but I don't think anybody beats Georgia until Atlanta. But like I don't think that when you look at what they have returning, what that schedule looks like, there's not a lot of difficult games on that schedule. And I think they're going to return to running the football. And the turnovers, man, as you guys know more than anybody, like how big of an impact that is on a team. And I think that you've lost your 2 weakest links when it comes to that specifically in Chris Rodriguez and Will Levis.
9 to 10 wins. We shall see. Back to the West, a team looking to get to 9 to 10 wins. Texas A&M, pivotal year for Jimbo Fisher after an abysmal season last year, 5-7. You bring in Bobby Petrino, and I felt like he kind of made one of the headlines early in the week when he was asked about play calling and gave kind of a vague answer. I feel like it's like, is Jimbo going to be willing to step out of the way, let Bobby call plays? They've got talent all over the field. Are we silly for believing in A&M yet again, thinking they can get to that 9-win, 10-win mark and be the team that we feel like they're supposed to be?
I mean, probably. We probably are. But we're going to do it because that's what we do. I think that, I tell you what, A&M really underachieved last year, lost a ton of kids to the portal, but there's a lot of talent on that offense, man. There's a lot of talent on that offense. And I like, people don't like Bobby Petrino for a number of valid reasons, but there's few guys that are better offensive minds even now than Petrino. And I know this is a decade ago, but like, you think about some of those Arkansas teams, they are the most slept on teams maybe in the country, definitely in the SEC, but maybe the country in the last decade. That 2011, 2012, those teams were like top 5 teams, but nobody talked about them because they lost to LSU and Bama each year, which were 2 of the best teams. I mean, obviously Bama won the Natty, and LSU was probably the best team that never won one in 2011. He put up ridiculous numbers when he had Ryan Mallett and he had some guys at receiver. They've got dudes there, man. They've got dudes at offense. You got Anaya Smith coming back. You got the sophomore now receiver, Stewart. Like a nightmare to watch against a lot of teams last year, especially in the second half of the season when he really seemed to understand like what his role was and how good he could be. And Connor Wickman, like he was so much better than what they had on offense the moment he was plugged in there to play. And I think that kid in year 2, you're going to see a progression. Listen, people forget that A&M was awful. They were 5-7. They're ranked outside of the top 100, I think, in almost every major statistical category on offense, right? They were horrible against the run too. People forget they beat LSU by 15 points when LSU still had everything on the line for them to get to like a potential playoff if they beat Georgia. They beat them by 15 points. I just think that sleeping on them is not the best move for a lot of teams in the SEC this year.
And as bad as they were, Marlo, to your point, lost a lot of one-score games. How you doing on time, by the way, Marlo? I know I've been I kind of surprised you with this run around the SEC. Okay, I just wanted to make sure. I want to talk about Tennessee next. The Volunteers.
I don't have Twitter to get on to, so that's fine.
Looking to build off of an 11-win season last season. Of course, the big storyline, you have to replace Jalen Hyatt at receiver, Cedric Tillman at receiver, and Hendon Hooker at the quarterback position. Joe Milton takes over. He was at SEC Media Days. They've been picked to finish second in the East. Most people feel, or a lot at least do, that Tennessee's the fourth best team in the SEC. They got to make major strides on the defensive side, but I think, again, most Vol fans and the expectations in Knoxville getting back to 9, maybe 10 wins is what they're expecting. Your thoughts? Do you believe that Joe Milton's the guy, and what are you expecting out of Josh Heupel in Tennessee this year?
So I'm very torn on Milton because I know what numbers he put up. He looked great in the Orange Bowl. Looked great, like way better than I thought he would. Here's the thing about Tennessee, and you can say I'm being biased or whatever. I think that Tennessee had a really good season last year, and Heupel has proven time and time again. I think he's had a top 10 offense in the last 5 years, no matter where he's been. He was great as an offensive coordinator, even at Mizzou. I think set a then SEC record for touchdown passes of the season with Drew Lock. Had a top 10 offense at UCF, had a top 10 offense with Tennessee, led the league in scoring and yards per game last year. They could still do that, potentially. But what they lost in Hendon Hooker is not really being talked about enough because Hendon Hooker statistically is the best quarterback that has ever come through that school. And I fully understand that Peyton Manning is the GOAT. I get it. And had them on higher stages or bigger stages, whatever you want to say, his entire time there. I'll tell you one thing Hendon Hooker did that he didn't do is beat Florida for one. But also when you look at the numbers he put up, he didn't turn the ball over. This is an offense that's predicated on so many things that like kind of have to go right? And a lot of it is deep balls and the timing on those deep balls. It's not easy. There's a reason why those numbers go down the further the ball travels in the air, man. Like there's a reason why that happens because it is not easy to throw a football, 40, 50 yards downfield and also drop it into a window that is very, very small. Hendon Hooker was able to do that better than almost anybody in the SEC last year outside of maybe Stetson Bennett. Bryce Young was up there, but he was better than Bryce. I haven't been sold on Joe Milton he could throw it through I'm going to say it. He could throw it through the fucking wall, right? Like he could throw it through a car wash. At the same time, we haven't seen him consistently be able to drop it in a bucket from 60 yards. That's awesome that he can throw a football 90 yards. And I'll give you a hot take here. I bet he gets drafted in the first round next year. I bet he gets drafted in the first round next year because Anthony Richardson did. So why wouldn't Joe Milton, who's probably a little bit more accurate and will probably put up better numbers in that offense? But you're going to have to Tennessee has been real bad and underachieved for a very long time. There's a difference between having a 10-win season or 11-win season and then stacking those. And I'm just not sold that they're there yet. They can be, but that defense was bad last year. The offense lost a ton of production. And I don't know if this is a system where you just plug in Squirrel White and replace the Biletnikoff winner. I don't know if that's how that happens. So I don't know, man. I think that there's a lot for me that I think that's like left to prove before I believe that Tennessee is taking the next step to challenge the SEC. Now, that being said, they are, I think, probably the second best team in the East going into the year. It wouldn't be a surprise at all if they end up there. But there's still meat on the bone for me of like what they need to do to convince me of other stuff.
The LSU Tigers, Chris Marler, the SEC West champions from a season ago. I thought it was interesting when Brian Kelly basically came out and said, we're probably a year away in regards to, in terms of recruiting to getting the depth we need to win a national title and, really be at the top of college football. But the bottom line is this: they found a way to get it done last year. Kelly comes over from Notre Dame. He beats Nick Saban takes them to the SEC title. They got blown out by Georgia. I get it, but
they scored 30 points, man.
True, they
That's
did.
They
Your thoughts on LSU, because I look at them. I mean, I think they're loaded across the board. I was surprised, admittedly, Chris, that they were not the pick in the SEC West. But I think it's one of those things where it's like people realize it feels like when you sleep on Nick Saban the most, they turn up a season in which they win the SEC.
Do you
and
think
win the
that people
title.
realize that yet?
Well, they picked them to win the SEC West. So I think we all knew that Georgia would be the pick for the SEC title, but Bama gets picked to win the West. Just thoughts on LSU. I mean, year 2 of Brian Kelly. Can they do it again and repeat as SEC West champions?
Okay, I want everyone to follow me when I say this, because where I'm going to take you is not a place you want to go. Okay? But just hear me out and just let me get through it and just try to, just close your eyes and try to understand where I'm coming from with this. Year 1 under Brian Kelly was incredible. You win the SEC West, you beat Bama. Here's a fun fact. You know that's only the 6th time they beat Bama in Death Valley since 1957? What a huge win. You go to you win the SEC West, you go to the SEC championship game, you put up 30 points, over 500 yards on that defense. Incredible. You outscore Purdue by like 1 million in the Cheez-It Bowl. Incredible job his first year. Incredible job. Jaden Daniels surpassed all expectations in year 1. Was awesome to watch. In like the best way to describe Jaden Daniels is like the best dual threat game manager I've ever seen. And that is not a knock on him, but my goodness, did he take care of the football better than he ever did in his first 2 seasons before he got to Baton Rouge. Now, hear me out. LSU returns 10 of 11 on offense, right? They return the best player on defense in the conference, and Harold Perkins, right? They return Mason Smith, who was gone for most of last year, but a huge recruit. A lot of people think he could be a future first-round draft pick. All of that's awesome. It's great. They're going to put up some points. They're going to score on a lot of people. Now let's take a step back and look at what happened objectively on the field last year. They beat Alabama, and they won that game. And hats off to them. They deserved to win that game. I'm surprised Bama was even in it. I'll go a step further and tell you they probably should have beat Bama the year before too. Now that being said, you beat Bama by 1 point in overtime on the last play of the game. The next week, you got to play Arkansas for a chance to clinch the division, and looked up and said, what? Arkansas has a backup quarterback in. We should steamroll them. We went from 14th to 5th after we beat Bama, and now all of our dreams and hopes about potentially even making the playoff are on the line. And what did they do against a backup quarterback? They won 13-10, and the game came down to a questionable call in the 4th quarter. Then you still have everything in front of you. You're still ranked 5th, and you can still potentially get to the playoff if you win out, which I know is a huge uphill battle, and you got Georgia looming in Atlanta. But you still got it there, and you go finish up the season in College Station against arguably the worst team in the conference. And what'd you do? You lost by 15, and you scored the 15. You brought it to within 15 in the 4th. It was even worse earlier in that quarter. But you beat Bama 3 weeks prior, which is a massive win, and everyone saw it. Now we go into the offseason, you score a bunch of points in garbage time against Georgia, and then you put up a lot of yards, and you go into this season with a good recruiting class, a head coach that's capable of doing stuff, and he's already shown you he beat Bama at home. Who does that remind you of? A team from the year before. All the things I just told you, building an entire offseason resume off of. You beat Bama. Sure, you stumbled afterwards, but hey, you beat Bama, and then you got a good recruiting class, and now you're going to next season with high expectations. Who does that sound like from the year 2021? Does it sound exactly like Texas A&M? Ding, 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 it does. I'm not saying they're going to go 5-7. I don't believe they're going to go 5-7. But if you can't see the similarities of like we're building up an entire like resume off this one win, they are. And I'm not saying it's even it's still a great win. It's still a great win. Still an incredible job in year 1. But let's pump the brakes. I'm thinking that this is like I thought it was bad that we just thought Tennessee was back. But this is the most like Texas is back situation imaginable going into this next year. I think they're going to be really good. They got to go to Tuscaloosa. They got to go to Oxford. I don't know what else is on that schedule. I know they got Arkansas at home early. Florida State to start the year. That would be a huge win to get them rolling. I think that would be good. But I just I have a hard time believing. I think 10-2 is very, very reachable. The fact that we're just assuming that they are the new kings of the SEC West, call me biased. I understand the shirt I'm wearing right now, but man, you beat Bama twice in the last decade plus. You did it by a combined 6 points. And one of those times was when you had the greatest team of all time with 2019 LSU. Just like with Tennessee, I'm going to have to see it before I believe it. And I just am not there at LSU.
Yeah, Marlo, let's stick with the SEC West then and the Alabama Crimson Tide, because I think to your point, one of the reasons that LSU is being voted by some as SEC West champions, including yours truly, it's the questions in Tuscaloosa. And it comes back to the quarterback. Ty Simpson, Tyler Buckner, Jalen Milroe, who's going to be the guy. And I think that's where it starts. And I thought it was interesting. We talked to a couple of people, or at least Brad Crawford did tonight, and 3 different people, 3 different answers on who the quarterback's going to be. So nobody really knows. That's the big. I'll tell you this. If and when Bama gets the quarterback thing figured out, we're probably having a much, much different conversation. Tommy Rees at OC. Yeah. I mean, heck, SEC Mike's got him finishing 3rd in the SEC West. So I feel like
SEC Mike also had Steve Sarkisian as the 9th best offensive coordinator in the conference 3 years ago. So let's just.
I'm not saying his word. I'm not saying his word is gold. I'm just throwing out kind of some differing perspectives. But either way, Alabama
and Big Game Boomer are very similar when it comes to that.
Anyways, Bama, one of the best rosters in college football. But when you have the questions you have at quarterback and you lose Bryce Young and Will Anderson from a season ago, there's going to be some question marks. But to your point, again, one of the best rosters. I thought Nick Saban at Media Days was actually very, I didn't realize he was such a jokester. That was something I learned about Nick Saban. I'd never been in the room with him, but thought he was very calm, confident in his football team. They've obviously got a chip on their shoulder, but they were picked to win the SEC West by the media. Your thoughts on that and just Alabama as a whole going into this season? Again, I know quarterback is the big talking point, it feels like, for the Crimson Tide.
Yeah, I think that, they've struggled over the past 2 years at times, especially on the road. I think that, when you look at why the doubt is there, I don't even think it's, unfair as to why the doubt is there. You're talking about the Timmy Huckabee comment at the bottom. I'm just trying to figure, was it Pate? Because I don't know who it could be, but thank you for bringing that to my attention, Timmy. So anyway, I think that this stuff with Bama, I don't think it's unwarranted, but from a standpoint of when I look at voting for this, right? You're not talking about winning the national championship. You're talking about the regular season and getting to Atlanta. And just being objective here, they've had only 3 times in the last 14 years have they lost 2 games in the regular season. So to sit here and think they're going to go 9-3, I think it's crazy. I no offense, I think it's crazy. But I will tell you this too. There's a very real scenario if you're a Bama fan that you don't want to hear. There's a very real scenario. I think they lose to Texas in week 2. I've said that all offseason. I said last year.
I'll say this more though. They beat Texas, and I think my opinion completely shifts on Alabama. I think it completely.
Well, I hope for our sake that changes, because I know that means a lot to the Bama fan base and the team especially. I'll tell Kristen to tell Nick.
Thank you.
I'm kidding, obviously, but no. So I think the whole thing with Bama is I get the quarterback situation. I don't think they have the quarterback situation figured out yet. Which is whatever, right? I think that they lose that. They don't have that situation figured out before Texas. I think you lose to Texas because I think Texas is going to be really good this year. I know everyone's tired of hearing it, but I just think that this is the year that they are really good and take the next step. Then you look at the rest of that. You get Tennessee at home. You get LSU at home. That A&M game is going to be tough because you got to go to College Station. That's a place they lost to last time they were there. And it's a place that is difficult to play in, right? But again, let's just break down some numbers. You can talk about all the things about how Bama almost lost this game and they almost lost this game. They almost lost this game. They didn't. They've lost 5 regular season games in the last 5 or 6 years combined by a total of 15 points. I'll say that again. They've lost 5 total regular season games in the last 5 or 6 years by a combined 15 points. like going into this year, that defense is going to be really, really good. And I know they had to replace both coordinators. I, for one, am not super pumped that they had to replace the coordinators because I didn't think they did that bad of a job. There were definitely times when I thought Bill O'Brien was going to give you an aneurysm, just like Pete Golding was. I don't know how you don't make an adjustment in 60 minutes of football against Tennessee by not putting a safety on Jalen Hyatt. Just put anybody. Put the team manager on him, or the water boy, anybody, just anybody. But that being said, I think that they are going to be really good on defense. And here's the thing that people don't remember about last year's team. I think they were +2 in the turnover margin. They've averaged, I think, they've been in double digits for turnover margin in 6 of the 7 previous years before that. Like +2 is wildly low. They only had 7 interceptions as a defense, which I was shocked going into the season. I thought they'd have a ton because of the fact that you have all that pressure up front with Anderson and Braswell and some of those other guys, Dallas Turner. You only have 7. It's the lowest in the Saban era in the last 14 years. I just don't think that those two things stay the same. And I think that you're going to have an increase in turning the ball over. You're going to have a better defense in terms of being able to be more suffocating. They were 4th in the country last year in yards per attempt allowed as a secondary. People forget the fact that they think the secondary sucked because of the Tennessee game. They only gave up 12 touchdowns in through the air all last season, which is the lowest in the SEC. They're going to be really, really good. Milroe or Buckner, I don't know what the hell happened. I just anybody with that last name, I don't want associated with my sports teams at all. I don't care if it's Bill or Tyler, just get out of here. Ty Simpson, Jalen Milroe, I don't know who the answer is there, but I will tell you that I think that Tommy Rees is going to be widely considered one of the better coordinators in the country at the end of the season. And people forget the fact that he was very close to getting the job as head coach at Notre Dame over Marcus Freeman. And they went with Freeman instead for whatever reason. That's fine. He stayed on, which I think says a lot about his character for one. But the thing that Tommy Rees does in his offense, in 2 of the 3 years he was the OC at Notre Dame, they averaged running the football 60% of the time. And if you sat there and listened to what Saban said, he made the comment flat out. He's like, we threw the ball too much. They averaged 51% pass to run play calling under Bill O'Brien the 2 years he was there. And I understand you had Bryce Young and the Heisman Trophy winner, all that kind of stuff, but that is by far the lowest ratio. I think last year itself was 50.4 or 50.6% pass. It was almost exactly 50-50. And you want to be balanced on that kind of stuff, but you want to have also an emphasis on the run game. And when you look at last year's team they were 4th in the country in yards per carry, right, at Alabama, but they were 82nd in attempts per game. That can't happen. And one thing that Tommy Rees does is he runs the football. 60% of their play calls in 2 to 3 years at Notre Dame were run plays. And I think they're going to sit there behind a massive offensive line with 5 stars they've accumulated over the past 2 years and run the football and bludgeon people to death. And I tell you what made me the most pumped about the whole thing. Dallas Turner flat out said it. They said, what is the expectation this year? And he said, it's joyless murder ball. And that, the combination of that kind of confidence from the player with how relaxed Nick Saban was tells me that Saban knows what he's got. And he is pretty confident in what he's got going into the season. Otherwise, I think you would have seen him be a little bit more panicked. In the years that he has acted like that at media days especially, that doesn't mean it's a scientific, they're going to win 11 games. But I think when you see him in that kind of jovial spirit, which he never is, I think he's pretty comfortable with what he's got in Tuscaloosa.
Mm-hmm. Now, Marler, you've been as complimentary as anybody when it comes to Georgia's program, what Kirby Smart has built. I was kind of surprised the media didn't try to, ask more questions about the off-the-field stuff. But either way, Kirby wanted to talk football. He did just that. Better never rests is the mantra for Georgia going into 2023. It feels like they're a machine that can't be stopped. I mean, I know they have question marks with obviously a new quarterback. They replaced both tackles. Mike Bobo's at OC. But again, you've talked about it, man, just the way they're recruiting, the way they're reloading. It's if you have to pick Georgia or the field to win the title, and I know nobody's won 3 straight championships in over 90 years, but right. I mean, the fact we're talking about them in that light that they are the favorite, I think it just goes to show you how great what he's built is. Just talk about Kirby's appearance, and then Georgia as a whole. I mean, do you think obviously they're the overwhelming favorite to win it all yet again?
And they should be. And nobody, including Nick Saban, is doing it better now than Kirby Smart. And I understand that Saban won more championships in his first 7 years or whatever. But you look at what Kirby's done. Currently has the #1 recruiting class. They went back-to-back. They won 33 of the last 34 games. You know, what they did to TCU on live television was problematic at best. I mean, my God. But then you talk about the fact that going into this year, I mean, people forget last year was supposed to be like a stopgap. It's supposed to be like a transition year and to get to this year. And now this year is even better from what you thought you were going to have a year ago. He's put more kids in the league in his first 7 years than any other coach in modern college football history. He's doing every single thing better than every other coach in the country. And it's incredible to watch. Now, I've lived in Georgia for most of my adult life before I moved to Columbia a couple months ago. That's a tough state to live in when you want to talk about rational fans, because they've been champions in their mind every year that I've been alive, and now they just actually get to wear the badge. But it's the best program in college football, and it's not a close second right now. And I think going into this season, they've caught a lot of flack about their schedule. It's not their fault that Oklahoma had to be taken off their schedule. I'll tell you what, too, man. If you had Oklahoma on the schedule, it's a great blue blood matchup, maybe. But Oklahoma was like, what, 6-7 last year? Does that really change the narrative of like how great they are if they go beat the brakes off of OU in Norman? Or I don't even know if that was a home game or not. One of the reasons their schedule is so easy is because of how good Georgia is, and you can't put Georgia on the schedule. Now, you don't have to play LSU. You don't have to play Alabama. You, of course, don't have to play A&M, because I don't think that's ever been a thing they've had to do besides the one time in Athens. But I think that there's not a more confident pick I could make in the season than Georgia going 12-0, because I just don't see anyone that's close to challenging them. South Carolina's a home game. I don't know why, because I love Beamer, but Kirby doesn't at all. And that was something you saw on display last year. And it, like, I thought it was a joke. It's very real. There's not a better coach too that like there's not a pettier coach than Saban or than Kirby Smart. Like, he will beat you out of spite and beat you soundly. I think that he's done a great job in building the depth and all that kind of stuff. But he's put that program in a place where can attest to this. Ohio State is also another team like that, where you look at that schedule now, you got a 2-game schedule basically. It's like you got to get by this game and the next game. And I tell you what impressed me more than anything that he did last year, it's not beating Ohio State, it's not going undefeated, the first team in the playoff era to win 15 games, I think. Right? No, Clemson did it in 18. But and LSU did too. Never mind. So anyway, but like he became what they did to Tennessee, just dismantling them when they were like number one, had all the confidence in the world, had beaten like, I want to say like 5 ranked teams going into that game, dismantling that offense, giving up a late garbage touchdown and really taking their foot off the gas. They could have beat Tennessee by 40. And that impressed me more than anything. So who on that schedule is going to beat them? They get Kentucky at home. They get y'all at home. Florida ain't going to do it. Mizzou's a home game. I don't see Kent State on there this year. That was fun for about 2.5 quarters. So yeah, I mean, who's going to beat them until Atlanta?
Yeah, and you had the great clip, Marler, going in that one where you basically said Georgia is going to step on your throat and rip your heart out, and there's just simply nothing you can do about it. I mean, I think that's the best way to phrase it, and that's exactly what Georgia did for 4 quarters. Finally, Chris, we get to the South Carolina Gamecocks, save the best for last. Shane Beamer, of course, takes the podium. One of the most likable guys in the SEC, if not the most likable head coach. I thought one of the things that really stood out, he talked about the amount of freshmen they're going to rely on basically at every single position. They've got 38 new players on the roster from last year, which, of course, I guess that's a normal thing in the transfer portal era, but there's going to be a lot of those they're depending on. Of course, he brought his quarterback with him, Spencer Rattler. I thought Rattler did a good job of handling the media and some of the other things, but your thoughts on Beamer at media days and more so just South Carolina this season? I've got the Gamecocks at 7-5, 4-4 in the SEC, which I think mixed reviews from South Carolina fans. They're feeling on my predictions. I think there are real question marks on both lines of scrimmage. Of course, the running back position, you got 4 scholarship running backs, and your RB1 going into the season opener is probably a converted wide receiver to running back to Kerryon Joyner, which all the love to DK in the world, but it's asking a lot of a guy like that to be the lead ball carrier. You also add guys like Nick Harbor, the true freshman on the outside. And of course, anytime you have guys like Rattler and Wells and that type of dynamic connection, you feel like the offense can be explosive, but Dabble Loggins a key OC hire there as well. So all that being said, thoughts on Shane Beamer, thoughts on South Carolina going in this 2023 season?
I love Beamer, man. Beamer's so likable. He's like skinny Sam Pittman. It's hard not to pull for him. He's like, it's so hard not to pull for that guy, man.
Do you think Beamer would enjoy a Hams beer also?
That was so weird that he got upset about that.
He said, you got a pretty good job. You can do a little better than that. Like, dang, shots fired.
I mean, the year before, I told Sam Pittman that he was 16-6 against the spread, and then I personally thanked him for it. And he was like, yeah, all right, woo pig. No, I think Beamer, he's got his work cut out for him. And I'll say this, because I know this is a South Carolina show, and I know that I'm not a guy that's going to sunshine pump and just tell you
please Marler, be brutally honest. That's why I love you on the show. And
I'm not going to be as rude as you. I don't know how you I mean, 7-5.
You're always more honest about your own team. I feel like I think that's what it comes down to.
Well, not on Twitter, which I'm not on anymore apparently. But I mean, like there's a lot of people. Like I always joke around there, like on social media, because some people they're going to call you a clown or they're not going to argue with you about the points you made. But they're going to flat out be like, oh, you don't know what you're talking about. Like, you know what? From now on, I'll just say that your team is going undefeated. Your rival's going to lose every game they play, and we're both going to live forever. How about that? Like, this is the dumbest shit ever. With South Carolina, I say all that to say this. I have been so aggressively wrong about everything Beamer has done since he's been there. And it's gotten to a point where, because listen, my sister graduated from there. My family lives in Lexington. I currently live in Columbia. I love it here. It's hot as hell, but I do love it here. I love Williams-Brice Stadium. I love the fans, all that kind of stuff. I want them, I want them to be good. I want them to beat the shit out of Georgia, okay? Like nobody's cheering harder for you in that game than me. But then I look at the schedule, and every year I'm like, oh, my God, you got to play Clemson. You got to play Georgia and Tennessee and Florida. And then you look at those games that you struggle with Kentucky and Mizzou and stuff like that, like you pointed out earlier. I want South Carolina to be good. So I'm going to doubt Beamer again because it's only brought good luck. And I just want you to know that a majority of me doing that is because I do think it's I love being proved wrong by Shane Beamer because there's just if anybody sat here and said they were going to beat Tennessee so badly they were going to run out of fucking fireworks, you're lying through your teeth. I mean, that was awesome. Then they go on the road. I finally watched that Clemson game. I know earlier here, because I was in Tuscaloosa for that game. Austin Gregory pointed out I rewatched that Clemson game for the first time, or I guess I watched it for the first time like a couple weeks ago. So great, breaking that streak in Death Valley, awesome to watch. That game in North Carolina is huge. Got to get it off to the right foot. Tennessee in the first month of the season is tough. They're going to be looking to destroy South Carolina. But if you can weather the storm and get to the second month of the season with a winning record and just don't slip up against teams you really think you should probably beat, like South Carolina, like Kentucky and Mizzou, I think you have a really good season. I think that Beamer has a really good chance to take control of this state, not from a recruiting standpoint necessarily, because I don't think this, not in a rude way, there's not enough talent in the state you need to really put a fence around it, but where you're kind of selling people on the culture of what he's doing better than what they're doing at Clemson. I know they've had a really good offseason recruiting, but you got a really good chance to take control of being like the flagship program in this state, because Dabo is Dabo. And if you're trying to figure out a place to play between Dabo and Beamer, I don't know why you would ever choose Dabo. All that being said, you brought up the fact that the offensive line, defensive line, I don't know if they got better there on either side of the ball. And that is why Spencer Rattler, as talented as he is, struggled so much last year because he was running for his life for most of the year. And They led the league in turnovers for the second straight year. You can't do that. Maybe the fumbles thing is is an anomaly and it's just bad luck, but the interceptions aren't. I love the addition of Trey Knox. Love. I cannot wait to see Nick Harbor. I can't wait to see that kid. That kid's a freak. And they need to get him the ball as much as possible. So I think the offense has a chance to be good. I just, in the trenches, I don't know if they're capable of competing at an elite level yet. I think 8 wins is not a crazy far-fetched thing. I think that beating UNC would be a huge deal because of Drake May, and I think they win that game for sure. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I don't see them competing with Georgia. I don't know about that. I don't see them beating Tennessee strictly because Tennessee is going to be out for blood in that game after what happened last year. So I would say 8-4, 7-5 seems about right. But man, go prove me wrong again, man. And there's just like I'm not gonna. I'll say this off air. I was gonna say just Shane Beamer, just cuck me into being wrong just as much as you can. Because nobody's pulling against South Carolina besides Clemson fans. It's such a likable story. It's such a likable program, likable head coach. I hope they win every game they play this year. I don't know if that's possible because of who's on that schedule, but it has been a tremendous job from Shane Beamer in his first 2 years. Mm-hmm.
They're doing special. They're doing special things in Columbia for sure, man. Chris Marler of College Football Uncensored, Saturday Unsouth. Chris, number one, thank you so much for being gracious with your time. That went a little bit longer than I expected, but the conversation was fantastic. And I always love talking SEC football with you. Of course, Gamecocks. Let everybody know where they can find College Football Uncensored since you are no longer on social media anymore.
Unbelievable. So
and once you get back on, because I know you're going to return, we'll make sure encourage folks to go follow you, build up the following again. But So Vern Funquist was the handle, but you can still follow me on Instagram, do that, all that kind of stuff. More importantly, the podcast is College Football Uncensored Podcast. We come out with these shows every Monday and Thursday coming into the season. We're starting our season preview stuff. We'll have you on for that, obviously for South Carolina, like we do every year. Maybe we'll get Steven Garcia back on, shirtless Steven. It was a great time a couple of years back. So College Football Uncensored, like I said, the podcast, subscribe. It's on. I think we're having trouble with Apple, of course, because I'm probably involved. I don't know why. But it's on Spotify, obviously. And like I said, also just Instagram, Vern Funquist, Saturday Down South, all that kind of stuff. So yeah, man, I appreciate it. And it was long, probably just because I talked way too much, but it's that time of season, man. I think people are starting to get excited for it. I can't wait. No, I love it, man. Chris, I appreciate it, man. Let's definitely do it again soon. And reach out. Let's get that South Carolina preview locked down, my man.
Yeah, sounds good, man.
All right, brother. Be good. Chris Marler of Saturday Down South, College Football Uncensored, does a great job talking SEC football. That went a lot longer than I expected. When you have conversation like that, guys, it's understandable. Hey, we'll jump into a quick break. On the other side, we'll run through the end of the show. We'll take your questions, your comments, your calls. In our Q&A power hour or power 30 minutes or so, we'll get as much in as we can here on this Monday. You're tuned in to the Daily Crow.
Marshall Dougie, ho. Muscle Dougie, ho.
All right, guys, we're back here on this Monday, July the 24th, 2023. Going to appreciate each and every single one of you tuning in. And let me say this. Thank you so much to Chris Marler for taking the time to chat, talk all things, not just Gamecocks, but SEC football, as we touched on all 14 SEC teams. And that being said, I do apologize. We went way into our Q&A power hour, but either way, we're going to get in as much as we can. And unfortunately, we can't go longer today. We're really on a roll. Normally, I'd say let's go like an extra 30 minutes, but we continue our opponent preview series. I've actually got a conversation lined up with some Missouri folks this afternoon at 3:15 or so. So we are unable to go longer, but we'll get as much as we can in the next 20 minutes or so. 843-790-3377. That's 843-790-3377. You guys are welcome to call in. Again, thank you all so much. Of course, the big news of the day, College Game Day is headed to Charlotte, North Carolina. South Carolina, UNC in the Queen City. That is going to be an absolute blast, man. And a great opportunity, as we talked about earlier, for Shane Beamer to continue to sell his program. It's always awesome. It's always awesome, no doubt, when you can get College Game Day, and there'll be a couple of segments, I'm sure, on the South Carolina football program and Shane Beamer and everything they're doing with the program in Columbia. So really, really good stuff. It'll kick off, and it'll kick off a great opening Saturday. And I say it's the opening Saturday. We do have week 0, but it'll kick off week 1 of the college football season on that Saturday. Going to be a lot of fun. That's going to be one hell of a weekend, man, for sure. Let's see. Austin Gregory, it sounds like, is going to do the sign stuff. Yeah, dude, we got to. That'd be incredible. Did somebody say that Chris Marler is back up on Twitter? Did somebody say that? Let me see. Let me check this out. Let's check this out. Okay, so it looks like he is. It looks like his Twitter is back up. I don't know if he's able to actually tweet or not, but it looks like his Twitter is active again. He's got 1 follower. Okay, no, never mind. That's wrong. I don't know. This is weird, man. X.com is just having a field day with Chris Marler right now. I don't know what's going on. Either way, let's see. Austin Gregory says, if all 14 fan bases were coming at you, who would be the easiest to fend off outside of Vandy? The easiest to fend off, I would probably say Arkansas. I think their fans, while they're rowdy, I tend to have a pretty good relationship with those Arkansas people. So I'll say Arkansas. But, dude, they're all tough. They'd all be tough. They'd all be very, very tough. Drummer Swirls, is it fair to say, even with all the concerns, Auburn still has a better roster than South Carolina top to bottom? I'm not going to sit here and say that I know Auburn's roster top to bottom as well as somebody who, for example, covers the Auburn Tigers. I don't think it's fair to say that, though. I don't. Not right now. I've got to see it on the field before I hear that. When you got a quarterback simply like Spencer Rattler and a receiver like Juice Wells on the offensive side, you got a safety like Nick Imawari. You've got Mo Kaba returning, Stone Blanton, Pup Howard on the defensive front. You got Jordan Strawn and Gear on the edge. You got Tonka Hemingway, Alex Huntley up front. I don't know. I don't know that I would go as far to say that Auburn's got a better roster than South Carolina. I would not say that. Spider-Man says, I was right behind the end zone when Ryan Helinski overthrew a wide-open Brian Edwards to cost us the game against App State in 2019. Worst day I've experienced in Willie B. Yeah, it's funny, Spider-Man, that play is forgotten because there was a penalty on that play anyway, so it wouldn't have counted no matter what. But, yeah, one of probably the worst throws I've seen from a Gamecocks quarterback ever. Braddock says, Kirby over Saban. Still trust Saban heading into 2023. I think right now, based off of what Kirby's done, back-to-back national championships, I don't know how you go with anybody else. Ken says, could USC be ranked if they beat UNC? I think South Carolina, Ken's, is ranked going into the season. I think the Gamecocks could be AP number 24 or 25. I think that's why College Game Day is going to Charlotte. I think they know or believe that South Carolina is going to be a top 25 team, and it's going to be a top 25 matchup, one of just two in week one. The other, of course, being LSU and Florida State. Let's see. Ethan says, hope you enjoyed your time in Nashville, Chris. It's awesome you're able to ask a few of them questions. Thought you asked good ones. Pittman was the most entertaining, and Beamer kept it classy. Yeah, for sure, man. For sure. Yeah, I thought Pittman did really well. He's so likable, man. It's hard not to pull for Sam Pittman. Jeff Gullidge, if I were to tell you Georgia wouldn't win the third straight championship, what would you say the reason would be? Bad quarterback play, bad OC, injuries on defense, what would it take? I think Carson Beck, I think there's a couple of things. I think there is a scenario, Jeff, where Georgia does not win at all. There are a couple of scenarios. Number one, Carson Beck is not as we expect him to be. Like, he's a complete swing and miss. He's not the guy. He folds under pressure. He does not play well in big games. He's just simply not what Georgia needs at the quarterback position. They take a step back there. Maybe some of that complacency sets in. That's another, it's very hard. I mean, mathematically, it's just nearly impossible to win 3 straight national championships. A lot of good teams have attempted to do it and not done it successfully. So Kirby Smart and Georgia's biggest enemy is complacency. Their biggest competition is themselves. I don't mean to sound like coach speak, rah, whatever, but truly, there's not a better roster in college football, especially if things click at both tackle spots, quarterback, and the OC on the offensive side. They're loaded. I mean, Georgia's flat out loaded. Bad quarterback play, complacency, and then I think maybe somebody being a little bit better than we expect, like a Tennessee, like a Kentucky, like an Ole Miss, maybe an Auburn, that could sneak up and could bite them and could get them. Or even like a LSU or Bama in the West that could take down the Georgia Bulldogs. So, or you get a game like Ohio State last year, where it was a coin flip 50-50 game. You know what I mean? So there are ways that Georgia could not win the national championship. I don't think there's a way Georgia could not win the SEC East. I don't see it. They're so much better than everyone else. And I agree with Chris Marler 110%. Wes Blankenship, he's a Georgia guy, but he made this point as well. And I agree, guys. People talk about the Georgia schedule. The schedule is very manageable. There is no question. People talk about the Georgia schedule, which I apologize. I just got a call from my guy that does not realize that I'm on my live show right now. But people talk about the Georgia schedule. It's very manageable. Don't get me wrong. You don't get LSU, you don't get Alabama, and you can't play yourself. But Georgia's schedule is quote-unquote easy because they're that much better than everybody. That's what it comes down to. South Carolina plays Georgia's schedule. We're having a whole different conversation about the schedule. Florida plays that schedule. Tennessee plays that schedule. We're having a lot different convo about that schedule. But it's the fact that Georgia, we don't view Tennessee as a test. We don't view Auburn as a test. We don't view Florida as a test because we don't view Kentucky as a test because they're that much better than everybody. I'm not saying it's not favorable in the sense they don't get LSU or Bama. They don't get Texas A&M. I get that, and the non-conference is laughable, but Georgia, I think, is just that much better than everybody. That's why the schedule is quote-unquote easy. Let's see. We'll keep it moving with the questions. Let's see. Brian Dean, first game, South Carolina, North Carolina, already read where Mac Brown's trying to play the underdog, no respect role. This matchup is picked Drake May versus Spencer Rattler when it's so much more. No doubt. Yeah, I think it's weird. I think it's weird that Mac Brown's trying to play the underdog when they are literally the favorite in the ballgame. So, let's see. Bake SC803. We are getting youth apparel very soon at tsus.store. We just got 3X sizes on the store, which I'm very excited about. We're working on hats right now. We are getting youth apparel in the next week or two. So please, I appreciate you guys' patience. Again, we're doing the store much differently these days, where we're actually fulfilling these orders versus just throwing stuff up and printing on demand. This is assuring we have much higher quality And we're ensuring that quality not just on the products themselves, but the fulfillment, everything in between. So thank y'all for y'all's patience. Youth sizes will be coming, though. If you want youth sizes, please reach out to me because I need to know exactly which youth sizes. Are you talking Beamer Ball? Are you talking Beamer Rattler? Are you talking Clem Sucks? What do you guys most want? Please let me know. Austin Gregory, let's coordinate that headshot. I will be in attendance. We will get TSUS on College Game Day. Austin, I can easily send you a headshot, my guy. There's plenty of them floating around out there. Let's see. Austin Gregory says beat Furman. Yeah, I'll say this in regards to the season simulation. Last night was abysmal. It was pathetic. We're going to play with the sliders. We're going to get this playbook figured out, okay? We're going to. We're going to get this playbook figured out. We're going to go to air raid. We're going to throw the football. And we're going to score some points. This is going to be a fun simulation series. I apologize for last night. And I'll tell you guys this, now that it's over, I ran a test simulation with the same playbook, same time, everything. Settings were the same. The final score was 44-20. North Carolina won, but still, at least that would have been more entertaining than 16-0. All I'm saying. So, we'll try to get this thing figured out, revamp everything, and go from there. I apologize for just an abysmal product that the simulation produced last night. We'll jump to the phone lines here.
Caller. Call from CBS Interactive Inc.
Okay. Anyways, I think that was actually – I got an email. I think that was SEC Communication asking for a survey or something. I don't know. We'll have to give them a call back and see what was up. Let's see. Jacob E says Texas A&M is just too much hype. Unless Jimbo gets an elite quarterback, they'll never win the SEC West. Okay. Fair enough. Yeah, Connor Wegman's got to be that guy. No doubt. He's got to be that guy. So, guys, 10 minutes to go here on this Monday, and I do apologize for the Q&A power hour getting cut so short. So Timmy Huckabee says thoughts about Hale throwing shade. Timmy, I'm completely unfamiliar with what it is you're talking about, so I have no idea. If somebody's throwing shade, then so be it, man. People throw shade at me every day, I guess. I don't know. That's kind of weird, though, considering that Hale McGranahan follows us on Twitter and has interacted with our content. But if he did, I don't know. I mean, I didn't hear what he said, Timmy. I wasn't tuned into their show. So I would be surprised if that were actually the case. But apparently you say that it happened. So I'm just surprised that like guys like J.C. Sherbert and JB and Phil would allow that. Timmy, do you have a quote in regards to what he said? Do you have a quote? Any? Can you paraphrase it? I'm curious now. You've sparked my curiosity. Let's see. Jeff Gullidge, I won't be live during the game tonight. We'll be at daughter's gymnastics class, but we'll catch up the replay. Definitely do so, Jeff. Hopefully we hang half 100 on Furman tonight, or FCS East is who it'll be. Let's see. Getting back into your questions. Let's see here. Robbie Davis, yes, the simulation tonight will be at 7 o'clock. We'll take on the Furman Paladins, again, a.k.a. FCS East. And then tomorrow night at 7, we've got the Georgia Bulldogs. So, going to be a fun next 2 days. The UNC one, man, let's just forget about it. Hey, forget about it. We're 0-1. Is what it is. We'll bounce back. No big deal. That was just silly. So, that was silly. Let's see. Timmy said he said they had non-credentialed people that don't cover USC covering USC at SEC Media Days. I mean, Timmy, I think you would have to really be reaching to consider that a shot at TSUS. That's just my personal opinion. I don't have any reason to believe that Hale would take some sort of shot. You know what? If he was, then so be it, and that's kind of on him because I got no problem with Hale McGranahan. And I don't think he was, though. I'll give him the benefit of the doubt. Let's jump to the phone lines here.
Call from
Marler.
Will, what's going on, my man? How are you?
Good. How about you?
I am doing fantastic, my man. What's going on?
Just calling to touch on a couple things. First off, how awesome is that? We got game day, man. That is amazing, dude. I can't wait. Week 1 can't get here fast enough. Just the hype between that Rattler-May matchup is going to be, they're going to be pumping that up. That should be good. Secondly, how much of a shit show that was last night, Chris. Jesus Christ, dude. Like, I wanted you to restart that damn game so many times. I'm like, just restart. Because, sometimes if you restart it, it's a different vibe.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like, I think it would have been more of the high-scoring vibes than the 16-0. That was pretty tough to watch.
I am, like I said, I'm genuinely sorry for the product that was put out. But the simulation is so silly, we might turn around and we might beat Georgia. So I don't know, man. You have to live with the good and the bad. But I will say that, it feels like the simulations have gotten more absurd over the years. I can't wait for the new game because too often there are results like that where it just makes literally no sense. So like I said, I'm going to play around with some stuff tonight, figure it out. I don't know, man. Maybe we can salvage the season after week 1. But no, college game day, to your point, Will, going to Charlotte, North Carolina. I mean, it's huge, man. And I think game day just identified that's the best game of the day. Like when you look at the quarterback matchup, you look, it's in prime time, right? Like you look at both teams are going to be ranked like that. I think they would have been making a mistake if they went to like TCU, Colorado, and they're trying to milk that Deion Sanders storyline, which I'm not saying it's not a big storyline, but I think when you look at the star power on both sides, when you look at it's a rivalry, a natural rivalry, South Carolina, North Carolina, you look at the importance of the game between the two teams. It should be a sold-out, packed-out house. I know tickets are really expensive right now, but it should be a fantastic atmosphere. I think it made sense for college game day to go. I'm sure they'll be back there in Romar Bearden Park, which will be really, really cool. CLT always puts on a good show, so expect nothing less. And going to be a lot of fun. Again, and great for the Gamecocks to sell the program and be on a national stage.
Yeah, man. I mean, it's just, everybody's excited for week 1. That's always everybody's undefeated. Sky's the limit. So for us to start off with a college game day week 1, which I know that's the first time that's ever happened, it's just makes it that much more sweet and that much more exciting to get as we get closer to that. Also, was hoping, I don't know if you saw this in the Discord or not, I posted this, was hoping that Beamer was going to give you something when you said, you always have those little quippy comebacks or something cool to say whenever somebody introduces themselves. I figured he'd throw something out like love to merge or, something of that caliber. I was kind of disappointed he just kind of, went through your question and didn't really acknowledge you as a whole. Were you expecting him to say something to you or not?
No, I wasn't. I think it's one of those things where Shane Beamer knows who I am. I know Coach Beamer knows who I am, and I'll leave it at that. No, I think it was one of those things, man, where I don't think it would have gone over very well with Steve Fink and the boys had he mentioned anything about TSUS or acknowledging me, I think, in any way. These coaches, they're all coached up on what to say, how to act. And, I didn't need that. I didn't really need that acknowledgement. I just appreciate Coach Beamer answering the question and taking the question, all that good stuff. But, I didn't expect that from him. Again, I know that Shane Beamer knows who I am, and that's good enough for me, and we'll just leave it at that. And the relationship is good. And, again, I'll just leave it at that. But, no, I think that, it's not so much of a secret, the relationship between I and Justin King, Steve Fink, some of those in the building. And I think when you factor that in, it's not a surprise that Shane Beamer just kept it professional and kept it moving and answered the question and moved on about with the presser.
I thought you did well, though, man. We're proud to see you actually make it mainstream and seemed like all your questions were pretty professional and you churched it up a little bit. You look nice without your hat out there. We don't get to see that a whole lot. But
yeah,
anyway,
something I'm doing more.
Yeah,
no, I appreciate it, Will. Something I'm doing more. I was just going to say something I'm doing more often with no hat. Will, I appreciate the call, my man. Always a pleasure. Great stuff. And I see this comment, Timmy Huckabee. Wait, what? Y'all don't have a good relationship? We have a great relationship, Beamer and I. We have a great relationship, Shane Beamer and I do. We have communicated many times on social media, back and forth. I met him in person, got to shake his hand. He signed this hat in person for me a couple of years back, and no, we have a great relationship. I've got a great relationship with others in the building, on the coaching staff, what have you. Really the only person I would say in the building that I don't have a good relationship with, or they feel, and when I say don't have a good relationship with, they feel some type of way about me. It's not reciprocated in the slightest. Steve Fink, the SID, and Justin King, Director of Creative Content, Associate AD, whatever you want to phrase him. I mean, Justin King hates my guts, and he has since the Will Muschamp days. It's funny. I was actually looking back at an old DM he sent me on Instagram back in 2020 where he was actually belittling TSUS and making fun of me not having access and being outside of the gate at Willie B, what have you, because I was out there. I rode my bike by there, and the team was scrimmaging or whatever, and I'm just outside kind of looking. And they took a picture of me. See, people don't know about this. They took a picture of me from the turnstiles, and Justin King was like basically mocking me, saying like, enjoy being on the outside. And, it's kind of funny. I was sitting there when I went back and saw that, and I was sitting there at SEC Media Days thinking to myself, I wonder how JK feels now. You know what I mean? So, but anyways, there's no reciprocated beef or bad blood, because why would there be? It's just silly. So, the people who matter in the building are fans of TSUS, like TSUS. At minimum, just respect it. And that's good enough for me. So anyways, guys, appreciate you all tuning in. Thank you all so much. We have run up against it at 3 o'clock. Again, I know the Q&A Power Hour was condensed today. I know the Q&A Power Hour was condensed today. So again, I do apologize for the shortened content today in that regard, but great stuff from our friend Chris Marler talking SEC football. Had a jam-packed show today. And by the way, guys, we really pick up the steam tomorrow when we get into our position unit preview series. These are always a blast, and cannot wait to start breaking down each and every single position unit on this Gamecocks football team, starting with South Carolina's quarterbacks. We'll talk about them Tuesday, Wednesday, get into running backs, and then we're off and running with that. Again, guys, check out tsus.store for all of your latest merchandise. We've revamped the store entirely. Go check it out. Really, really good stuff. We're dropping new products on the daily. Also, of course, be sure you hit that subscribe button on YouTube. Hit that bell icon so you get notifications of when we drop new video content, new live content, etc. Also, of course, hit the subscribe button on the podcast, iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, Google Podcasts, wherever you get your podcast. And be sure you tune in tonight for the season simulation series as we take on Furman. Guys, appreciate you all tuning in. Thank you all so much. Have a great rest of your Monday, and we will talk to you all tomorrow.